Chapter 21-28. Then, Zhong Tianyao was in a difficult position. He had only heard of the legendary netherbat. How could he know that this poison actually went deep into the soul? Forget it. I happen to know an ancient detoxification technique. I can try it on fellow Zhong. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Zhong Tianyao was overjoyed once more. He clasped his hands and said, "Then, fellow Taoist, please follow this Zhong to my Zhong family's ancestral hall. We'll study the ancient artifact refinement arts together, and this Zhong will experience fellow Taoist Zhao's ancient detoxification method again." Seeing that Zhong Tianyao was so tactful, Xiao Hua smiled and said, "That's great. However, I still have to go out and bring my wife to Zhongling Mountain Villa first." "Okay, I will wait here for Miss Xue." Zhong Tianyao cupped his hands and said, "I have offended you before. I will definitely apologize in person." Xiao Hua smiled and turned to fly out of Zhongling Mountain Villa. Not long after, he came back hand in hand with Xue Xue. Seeing Xue Xue, Zhong Tianyao and the others naturally bowed and apologized. Xue Xue was also generous and respectfully returned the greeting. Then, the two were invited into the Zhong family's ancestral hall by Zhong Tianyao. Zhong Tianyao was guarding at all times. Even if Xiao Hua killed the Zhong family's disciples, he would not leave easily. The Zhong family's ancestral hall was a few low wooden houses. It was located among the rows of buildings in Zhongling Mountain Villa. It was as simple and shabby as Shang Huaming's ancestral hall. It was quite out of place. When Xiao Hua and Zhong Tianyao pushed open the door and entered, they saw that there were many incense sticks and candles inside, as well as many black wooden signs. On the signs, there were some golden words. From top to bottom, from left to right, the entire wooden house was lined up. Cough cough, Zhong Tianyao coughed twice and said with some pride, "My Zhong family has been passed down since ancient times. During this period, I don't know how many times it has been destroyed. These are the famous ancestors of my Zhong family in the recent thousands of years. Of course, compared to the Imperial Thunder sect, my Zhong family is still too small." "It's already very good," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "To be passed down since ancient times, this is no small matter. However, I am a little curious. Since fellow Zhong knows that the Zhong family has been passed down since ancient times, why are there no records of it?" Zhong Tianyao sighed. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, look at today. If fellow Taoist wasn't here, my Zhong clan would probably have been exterminated. Who knows when my Zhong clan would be revived again? What fellow Taoist Xiao is seeing now, will it still exist when that day comes? And this Xiao understands." Xiao Hua nodded slightly. "Of course, I didn't expect my Zhong family's heritage to be so profound until I discovered the ancient refining method under the ancestral hall." A trace of excitement appeared on Zhong Tianyao's face. Only now did this Zhong know that the origins of my Zhong family can actually be traced back to ancient times. Hee. So fellow Taoist Zhong started to refine artifacts. Xiao Hua chuckled. "How many years ago was that?" "Well, it was a few decades ago." Zhong Tianyao wasn't interested in calculating numbers. He brought Xiao Hua and Xue Xue to the side of the ancestral hall and came to a corner. He took out a magic tool that looked like a sickle from his storage pouch and turned to Zhong Peifu. "Inscribe the spell that this old man taught you here." "Yes," Zhong Peifu nodded and activated his transcendence energy. A few seemingly cryptic seals struck the artifact, and the artifact emitted balls of green brilliance, fluttering like fireflies. Zhong Tianyao waved his sickle, and balls of green light landed around everyone in an extremely orderly manner. When all the green light dissipated, the space near the green light rippled, emitting a strange fluctuation of spiritual energy. This fluctuation rotated like a whirlwind, bringing everyone underground. When Xiao Hua's vision darkened, it immediately lit up again. When Xiao Hua opened his eyes, good heavens, when Xiao Hua saw the scene in front of him, he couldn't help but widen his eyes and shake his head inwardly. Shang Huaming's ancestral hall was admittedly a cave, but compared to this space, it was simply a small thatched cottage. And below this ancestral hall was simply a palace. An underground palace. A gigantic underground palace. Inside this palace, whether it was the pillars, chairs, decorations, etc., they were all several times larger than what they usually saw. Xiaohua's divine sense swept over, but all the walls and so on were isolated from divine sense. Xiaohua couldn't see clearly. No wonder this young master couldn't find this place. Xiaohua curled his lips. If it weren't for old ghost Zhong leading the way, this young master probably wouldn't have been able to enter. Zhong Tianyao looked around and sighed. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't look at how splendid this palace is, it's just a facade. This old man has long been clear that apart from some stone chairs and stone tables, there's nothing else. To be honest, it's just a gigantic space. If this old man hadn't found a dozen or so stone walls inscribed with ancient characters in the innermost part of the palace, this old man would have suspected that he was happy for nothing. Ancient characters? Xiaohua was stunned and asked curiously. These ancient characters. Fellow Taoist Zhong can understand them? He. Zhong Tianyao clapped his hands and took out a jade slip. He smiled and said, if my Zhong family's patriarch didn't pass down this item, how could this old man understand it? Is that so? Xiaohua reached out and took it, but didn't look at it. Instead, he smiled and said, this is the Zhong family's inheritance. It's not suitable for this Xiao to look at it, right? It's fine. Since this Zhong has already promised fellow Taoist Xiao to comprehend the refining method, if I don't look at this item, how can I comprehend it? Zhong Tianyao waved his hand. All right. Xiaohua nodded and put the jade slip into his bosom. He said, fellow Taoist Zhong is so sincere, this Xiao will kindly accept it. However, fellow Taoist Zhong's poison can't be delayed any longer. This Xiao will first detoxify fellow Taoist. Thank you for your trouble, fellow Taoist Xiao. Zhong Tianyao nodded and thanked him without any surprise. Thus, Xiaohua arranged for Zhong Tianyao to sit on a stone chair and used the green python's poison and the method of fighting poison with poison to detoxify Zhong Tianyao. However, that netherbat's poison was indeed powerful. Xiaohua estimated that he would need to use 9 drops of green python's poison in succession to completely detoxify the poison. While detoxifying the poison, Xiaohua took a look at the Zhong family's jade slip. To Xiaohua's surprise, this jade slip recorded the inscription of armor. It was a supplement to the inscription of armor that Huang Yi remembered. Seeing this, Xiaohua was very happy. After 9 days, Xiaohua understood all of the inscription of armor, and Zhong Tianyao's poison could be considered to have been completely eradicated. Zhong Tianyao's gratitude was self-evident, but he was even more moved by Xiaohua's aptitude. He himself knew that he had used dozens of years of effort to understand these ancient characters. Xiaohua had completely comprehended them in just a few short days, which really made him feel ashamed of his inferiority. Soon after, under Zhong Tianyao's lead, Xiaohua finally arrived at the deepest part of the palace. Everything here was already in tatters, and even incomplete. Dozens of tall stone walls stood there, and the large inscription of armor on them were also damaged. There were many places that were blurred. Fellow Taoist Xiao, this is the ancient refining method. Zhong Tianyao looked at these stone walls, and his eyes flashed with a trace of divine light. He said proudly, to tell fellow Taoists the truth, this old man also wants to rely on this refining method, to raise my Zhong family from a cultivation family to a cultivation sect. Haha, Xiaohua looked at the first stone wall and said absent-mindedly, this burden is too heavy, fellow Taoist Zhong should be mentally prepared. Speaking until here, Xiaohua's face revealed a shocked expression. Then, his eyes no longer looked at the stone wall, and he sat cross-legged, his palms facing the sky, and closed his eyes to meditate. Xiao. Zhong Tianyao was slightly stunned. He was just about to call out to Xiaohua, but looking at Xiaohua's appearance, he immediately understood that Xiaohua had comprehended something. He looked at the stone wall that he had already seen countless times, and the inscription of armor was still there. Where was there anything to comprehend? Zhong Tianyao and the others didn't dare to disturb Xiaohua's meditation, and all of them tiptoed out of the depths of the palace. Then, Zhong Tianyao left Zhong Peifu to accompany Xue Xue in the palace, and he brought Zhong Peiyuan out of the ancestral hall. After all, Zhongling Mountain Villa had such a big commotion, and he was still afraid of Qin Kai's actions. However, more than a month passed in a flash, and it was a moonless night. Zhong Tianyao was ready for battle, but Qin Kai's nether bat didn't appear at all. This wasn't out of Zhong Tianyao's expectations. Since Zhong Tianyao already knew about the nether bat naturally couldn't get close so easily, and Qin Kai was also afraid of the Zhong family's counterattack, so he must be making preparations in Fan City. It was a calm month for Zhong Tianyao, but it wasn't for Xiaohua. The reason why Xiaohua had comprehended something was because of the 4 large inscriptions on the rightmost side of the first stone wall. These 4 inscriptions were none other than weapon refining the world. When Xiaohua saw these 4 A's inscriptions, a mass of text immediately gushed out from his mind. Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised, and he hurriedly closed his eyes to recall. The words were also weapon refining the world, but it was the weapon refining the world in Xiaohua's memory. Whether the content was the same as the one in front of him, Xiaohua didn't have the mind to know for the time being. It wasn't until 15 days later that Xiaohua laughed and stood up. In these 15 days, not only did he recall the contents of weapon refining the world, but he also reviewed the refining techniques within it. Xue Xue and Zhong Peifu heard Xiaohua's voice and rushed over. Xiaohua smiled and said, "Fellow Zhong, this Xiao suddenly had some comprehension. I've caused you to worry." No matter. Senior Zhao's cultivation has improved. This junior is also happy. Zhong Peifu said very respectfully. And this Xiao wants to continue studying the refining techniques. If fellow Zhong has the time, you can ask your family head what materials are needed to repair the Zhong family's artifacts. If this Xiao has it here, I'll give it to you. If it's incomplete, your Zhong family will have to go out and find it. Okay. Zhong Peifu had actually already received Zhong Tianyao's instructions. Not only did he have to accompany Xue Xue here, but he also had to wait for Xiaohua to speak. At this moment, he was naturally happy and turned around to leave. "Wife, you should also cultivate." Xiaohua looked around and smiled. "This place is very quiet. It's really a good place to cultivate. Are you all right?" Of course I'm all right. What could be wrong?" Xiaohua smiled and said, "Only good things await your husband." Chapter 21-29. All right. Xue Xue saw Xiaohua's cocky face and felt helpless. She slowly walked out of the palace, found a place, sat down cross-legged, and continued to cultivate. "All right, let this young master take a look. What's the content of this Dawn Rain Continent's primordial secret artifact refining technique, refining the world?" The corners of Xiaohua's mouth held a smile. "I wonder what's the difference between it and this young master's refining the world." In the following 10 days, Xiaohua looked through the entire refining the world and carefully memorized them. After that, he carefully pondered over them, and when he combined the contents of this refining the world with the refining the world in his own memories, he realized that the 2 refining the world did not have any direct connection. They were simply 2 different things. However, although the 2 didn't have any direct connection, they supplemented each other. The artifact refining the world in Xiaohua's memories recorded the refining methods of all kinds of artifacts. The artifact refining the world on the stone wall recorded the general principles and methods of refining artifacts. This method was called the 5 elements refining technique. It was the general principles of the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. This general principles of refining tools was definitely 100 times stronger than the one Xiaohua just remembered together with the refining the world. It was like the difference between clouds and mud. Great, Xiaohua was so happy that he scratched his ears and cheeks. He almost jumped up. He also looked at a lot of refining techniques and had some gains in his heart. He even wanted to refine tools himself and repair the suppressing cloud seal. However, he didn't go through any systematic learning, so it was hard to avoid some mistakes. Now, this 5 elements refining technique covered all refining techniques. In other words, the vast majority of the refining techniques of Dawn Rain Continent could be incorporated into this 5 elements refining technique. No wonder Zhong Tianyao wanted to establish a sect. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. With this 5 elements refining technique, the Zhong family would be able to quickly rise up and transform from a cultivation family to a cultivation sect. Of course, this was on the premise that it wasn't coveted by other cultivation families and wasn't detected by other cultivation sects. The Zhong family's favor can be considered big. It can be compared to this Xiao's favor of saving old ghost Zhong. Xiao Hua secretly pondered while memorizing the 5 elements refining technique. At the end of the stone walls, Refining the World listed 5 typical examples of using the 5 elements refining arts to refine magic tools. One of them was a magic tool for teleportation magic tablets. Xiao Hua could not help but smile when he finished looking at this example. Isn't this the Grand Universe teleportation token? In his space, there was a damaged Grand Universe shifting token waiting to be repaired. He had never imagined that he would actually obtain a complete forging technique. Then wouldn't repairing the Grand Universe teleportation token be a piece of cake? Thinking of this, Xiaohua thought of that old case from many years ago. Just what is the background of Changbai Sec's Fan Tong? There were so many good things in his storage pouch. Furthermore, there were actually 2 layers of space. The Grand Universe shifting token was hidden in the inner layer. After the Feather Immortal gathering, there was a cultivator with a higher cultivation than Martial Uncle Zhen Qing who chased after me. Now, it has been dozens of years and there has been no movement. I'm afraid that those people have forgotten about the Grand Universe teleportation token. It's a pity that there are only 5 elements refining arts. There are no 5 elements refining arts that do not belong to the 5 elements refining arts. There is also no 5 elements refining arts that do not belong to the 5 elements refining arts. Xiao Hua sighed with regret. Then he smiled and said, if 5 elements refining arts are so common, then how can it be considered a rare art? If the 5 elements refining arts is so simple, then it can't be a famous magic tool from ancient times. In the following time, Xiao Hua comprehended the new refining the world and quietly waited for Zhong Peifu's reply. On this day, Xiao Hua waved 2 balls of fire in his hands and was trying out the fire refining arts. Then he saw Xue walking over. Wife, is there something wrong? Xiao Hua smiled and said, is there a problem with the technique? Xue smiled faintly. I have already asked what I should ask. Now, it's a matter of the Zhong family. Yes, I know. Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and said, did the Zhong family bring the list of materials? You already know, yet you're still here talking nonsense with me. Xue smiled and handed the jade slip in her hand to Xiao Hua. Senior Zhong brought this morning and asked me to give it to you. Tisk tisk, Xiao Hua smiled and said, didn't I miss you? I wanted to talk to you more. Then he looked at the jade slip in his hand and shook his head again. I'm afraid that the materials used to repair magic tools are too rare. Old Ghost Zhong did not dare to come directly, so he asked you to give it to me. Of course. Xue smiled and turned to leave. Who told you to boast that day? Now you're feeling the pain? Don't blame me. Looking at Xue's back as she ran away, he said in a very low voice, if the Zhong family's magic tools did not involve the awakening of the bloodline, if you did not dare to build your foundation, how could I refine magic tools for them for free? Xiao Hua's voice was naturally very low, so it was impossible for Xue to hear it. Xiao Hua released his divine sense and looked at the jade slip. His face showed a trace of strangeness. This was because there were many materials in the jade slip, and the 6 most precious materials were at the very top. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua had collected these 6 materials to repair the cloud-suppressing seal, such as bloodstone, cloud gold liquid, and fragmented gold stone. The Zhong clan did not use many of these materials, so Xiao Hua should be able to take them out. Damn it, if I did not know what was in this space, none of you could see it. I would really think that you were spying on me. Xiao Hua muttered. Then he looked at the materials in the back and curled his lips. I will not take out the materials in the back no matter what. Let the Zhong family's disciples find them. Then, Xiao Hua walked out from the depths of the palace. Zhong Peifu did not leave at all and was waiting in front of the palace. Seeing Xiaohua walk out with a smile, Zhong Peifu's face became embarrassed. He cupped his hands and said, "How is Senior's understanding of the refining method?" Xiaohua returned the greeting and said, "This ancient refining method complements what this Xiao learned before. Although I still need to apply what I learned, this Xiao is confident that I have already comprehended it." A trace of surprise appeared in Zhong Peifu's eyes. He was no longer shocked as he said, "So, Senior can help my Zhong family repair magic artifacts?" Xiaohua didn't like the fact that Zhong Peifu's words seemed to have a hidden meaning. He took out the jade slip and said, "Of the items listed in this jade slip, I only have the first 6 items that are the rarest. The rest are too common, so I didn't bring them with me." Ecstasy. Zhong Peifu's face could only show this kind of expression. He hurriedly shouted, "Recently, there is an auction in my Meng country's Sea City. This Zhong's third brother has already set off. The auction in Sea City has always been attended by the cultivator families and sects in the south of my Meng country. Moreover, people from the islands overseas will also come. Not to mention other materials, there should be a lot of ordinary refining materials. As long as Senior can gather all 7 of the most precious ones, the rest shouldn't be a problem." Chapter 2130. Oh, Sea City's auction? Xiaohua's eyes turn and says, "I originally wanted to use these materials to repair my magic treasures. Those ordinary materials also need, rest assured Senior Xiao." Zhong Peifu smiles apologetically. This time third brother brought a lot of spirit stones and originally intended to buy 2 sets. One of them is my Zhong family's gift to Senior Xiao. Very good. Xiaohua is happy in his heart and asks again, "Is Sea City at the seaside? Why do the islands from overseas come to Sea City to bid? How far is QC from here? What is the situation of QC?" Senior Xiao, Sea City is 300 li away from QC. It is the closest city to QC in Meng country and is the foundation of Su family. Zhong Peifu says, Su family's ancestor originally occupied an island overseas. After that island sank, he brought his family's descendants ashore and settled down in Sea City. Thus, he has some connections with the islands overseas. Su family saw that the things on Meng country's mainland are different from the islands overseas. Furthermore, there is no place to trust in the islands overseas. Thus, they used Sea City as the location for the auction and let the various cultivation sects trade with the islands overseas in Sea City. They also benefit from it. As for my Zhongling mountain village, it is not too far from QC. It is about 7,000 to 8,000 li away. My brother has already gone there a few days ago. I am afraid that he has already reached Sea City. Sea City's auction will only last for 3 days. He should be back in a few days. Xiaohua nods. "I might go to QC. How is the situation overseas?" "This is somewhat troublesome." Zhong Peifu shakes his head slightly and says, "The islands overseas are rather mysterious. They do not have much contact with our Meng country cultivators. Usually, they would only come to the mainland during the auction. The rest of the time, they are at sea." I just want to ask about the situation of QC. Xiaohua explains, "I do not intend to visit any island." Junior understands. However, Junior has only been to the shore of QC and did not go deep. Zhong Peifu came to a sudden understanding and replied, "But I've heard the disciples of the Ocean City's Su clan mention that the winds and waves within the 2,500 kilometers area of the QC can be considered to be calm. Even if there are large winds and waves, it's nothing to cultivators like us, but it might be fatal to some fishermen. However, after 50,000 miles, the wind and waves suddenly become fierce, and the weather is also complicated. The strangest thing is that the spiritual chi of heaven and earth is also relatively thin. To cultivators like me, it is absolutely dangerous. Therefore, the vast majority of the islands are distributed within 10,000 miles. There are very few islands beyond 10,000 miles. It was said that this sea was boundless. The further one went, the thinner the spiritual energy of heaven and earth became. A spirit-severing stage cultivator once tried to fly to the depths of the sea. However, after flying for more than 2 months, he still couldn't see the end. Other than seawater, there was seawater. Even aquatic beasts were becoming increasingly rare. In fact, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was almost gone. That senior didn't dare to move forward and hurriedly rushed back. However, on the way back, he was exhausted and his Zhenyuan was greatly consumed. He actually encountered a spirit beast in the water. If it wasn't for that senior having some great divine ability and barely escaping from the spirit beast, he would have lost his life in the Kuai He Sea. Ever since then, no cultivator has attempted to search for the edge of that place. So it's that dangerous? Xiaohua was somewhat stunned and asked again. A 10th grade spiritual beast seems to be only at the late stage of nascent soul, right? That's a spirit-severing stage cultivator. Even if his dermic power was exhausted, it shouldn't be to this extent, right? He, Senior Xiao is a cultivator from the country of Shi. You haven't been to the QC, so you might not know. Zhong Peifu smiled apologetically. The QC is so vast and boundless. There are many sea beasts in it. Oh, Senior can think about it. The QC is an ocean and it's extremely deep. There are different sea beasts in every layer of the water. The deeper you go, the more powerful the sea beasts are. With so many sea beasts fighting each other, those who can survive are mostly powerful characters. 10th grade spiritual beasts are rarely seen on land, but there might be some in the sea. And the strength of a 10th grade spiritual beast, I'm afraid it's even more powerful than the 10th grade spiritual beasts on land. Besides, it's impossible for cultivators like us to enter the depths of the QC. Who knows if there's a sea beast more powerful than a 10th grade spiritual beast? Since even a spirit-severing stage cultivator can't resist it, a transcendent grade spiritual beast, it's not impossible, right? Oh my! Xiao Hua was flabbergasted. He smiled and said, if that's the case, this Xiao is also ignorant and inexperienced. This Xiao knows about the 3 countries of cultivators, sword cultivators and millions of Meng mountains, but I never thought that in the south of Xiaoyu continent, in this QC, there's actually such a powerful thing. Senior Xiao isn't in Meng country, so naturally you don't know. Zhong Peifu smiled apologetically. We cultivators can still be called kings on land, but in the sea, the cultivators from the various islands can't be the masters of the sea. Furthermore, it is precisely because of this that the cultivators of the outer sea islands are generally more powerful than us cultivators of the continent at the same cultivation level. It's just that their living environment is more dangerous, and their reproduction is also less. That's why they can't pose a threat to us Meng cultivators. Zhong Peifu continued. In addition, because there are many spiritual beasts in the sea, a lot of the materials used for refining tools and talismans are mostly sent to the land from the various islands. As for us Meng cultivators, because of an unwritten rule, very few people can go out to the sea to hunt spiritual beasts and obtain these materials. What unwritten rule? Xiao Hua asked curiously. The QC is the QC of the various islands. Meng cultivators and even the cultivators from the 3 countries of cultivators can travel to the QC, but they can't make a living by hunting spiritual beasts in the sea. Zhong Peifu explained, even the Su family of Sea City can no longer hunt spiritual beasts in the QC after they fell to Sea City. They can only make a living by bidding. Xiao Hua sneered, what's the point of this rule? Who would be so bored as to go to the dangerous sea to pass their days? Senior Xiao is wrong. According to Junior's knowledge, there are some cultivators, especially the loose cultivators of Meng, who often go to the QC to hunt spiritual beasts in the name of traveling. Loose cultivators? Xiao Hua was slightly startled and immediately smiled. Loose cultivators have low cultivation and no foundation. What kind of spiritual beasts can they hunt? It's fine as long as they don't get eaten by spiritual beasts. Could it be that the various islands also don't allow it? Exactly. Zhong Peifu nodded and said, if Senior Xiao goes to the QC, you will know when you get there. The QC is not like the land. There are many fishes and beasts in the sea, almost uncountable. In this kind of situation, just like the cultivators on the land, there are all kinds of spiritual beasts. Even if you are a loose cultivator, you can still find suitable spiritual beasts to hunt. Oh, this Xiao understands. Xiao Hua nodded and said, that's right, the Dawn Rain continent is only a flat surface. Actually, there are countless mortals and many cultivators. Moreover, the Guihe Sea is divided into who knows how many layers and is so big. There are definitely many kinds of spirit beasts inside. Actually, the spiritual beasts that loose cultivators can hunt are not considered much. The various islands might not even put them in their eyes. Zhong Peifu said again, it's just that we can't let loose cultivators break these rules. Otherwise, everyone will go to the sea to hunt. How can the various islands survive? The various islands are too stingy. Xiao Hua said disdainfully, the QC is so big, how many people do they have? Even if all the cultivators of my Dawn Rain continent went to hunt, how many can they hunt? Zhong Peifu scratched his head and said, Junior also had the same idea. However, Junior did not go deep into the QC and did not know the situation inside. However, if it is as Senior said, the various islands don't need to emphasize this rule, right? Perhaps it is because the spiritual energy in the depths of the sea is thin? Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Xiao Hua knew that Zhong Peifu also knew very little. The more he asked, the more vague the answer would be. He might as well go and talk about it. Moreover, he and Xue were just going to take a look at the QC. It's not like they went deep, so why should he care so much? In the future, he still had to return to the Imperial Thunder Sect and live his life in the Imperial Thunder Sect's myriad Thunder Valley. Who would have the patience to care about the matters of the QC? Yes, Zhong Peifu nodded. After pondering for a moment, he said, then, Senior Xiao, are you going to continue comprehending the art of refining here, or are you going to my Zhong family's refining grounds to practice? Xiao Hua thought for a moment and said with a smile, this Xiao has already been underground for dozens of days. I better go out. I'll have to trouble fellow Zhong to find a quiet room for my wife. This Xiao will go to the refining grounds. Yes, Senior Xiao, please come this way. Zhong Peifu very respectfully invited Xiao Hua and Xue, who he called over, to stand at a corner of the palace. He took out his magic tool. Under the urging of his magic power, the three of them arrived at the shabby ancestral hall. Fellow Taoist Xiao. The moment Xiao Hua appeared in the ancestral hall, Zhong Tianyao's divine will followed him. A very humble voice sounded from outside the ancestral hall. I wonder if fellow Taoist has any harvest inside? Many thanks, fellow Zhong. Xiao Hua walked out of the ancestral hall and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist didn't keep it to himself. Of course, I gained a lot. At this moment, this Xiao is almost eager to give it a try. I want to see how this refining art is like. Zhong Tianyao laughed loudly. He pulled Xiao Hua's hand and said, since that's the case, fellow Taoist Xiao, please let this old man experience fellow Taoist's divine skill. Xue followed Zhong Peifu to find a quiet room to practice, while Xiao Hua followed Zhong Tianyao to the underground refining grounds of the Zhongling Mountain Villa. Xiao Hua had been to this place before. He saw that this newly opened place wasn't too big, but it was in accordance with the rules. It was precisely the place that Zhong Tianyao had deliberately planned for a long time. Xiao Hua followed Zhong Tianyao to a rather large room. Zhong Tianyao pointed at a bunch of things on the ground and said embarrassedly, these things were all prepared by this old man for refining these past few years. Moreover, this old man also found a hidden earth fire here. It's a pity that the earth fire is sealed with a restrictive spell. This old man can't open it. I can only use these things to refine it. Chapter 2131. Oh! Hearing this, Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel curious. If fellow Zhong doesn't mind, can you let me take a look? I can be considered to have dabbled a little in the way of formations. Fellow Taoist also understands formations? Zhong Tianyao really didn't know what to say. Any cultivator that could understand a refining technique was already pretty good. Where would they have the time to comprehend formations? Moreover, the essence of formations had long been lost in the Xiaoyu continent. Apart from special cultivation sects, where else could one learn formations? The Imperial Thunder sect wasn't good at formations. Fellow Taoist Xiao, this way please. Zhong Tianyao said and brought Xiao Hua to a deeper place. This place was somewhat similar to the previous palace, but it was even more dilapidated. In a place where the spiritual energy fluctuations were very obscure, there was a faint scorching flame emitting from it. This old man first discovered this earth fire, and then there was a strange movement in the ancestral hall. When this old man used the clan's magic tool to enter, only then did I know that there were relics of refining tools here. Zhong Tianyao explained. Then this old man made arrangements for the nearby area according to the design of refining tools. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over the restriction. He frowned slightly and waved his hand. If fellow Taoist Zhong believes me, then leave this place to me. Really? Seeing Xiao Hua so confident, Zhong Tianyao really didn't know how to express his feelings. Really? A series of pleasant surprises and a series of inconceivable feelings. This was all obtained after he added his malicious words and even had the intention to kill Xiao Hua. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please go ahead. I'll go out now. If fellow Taoist has any matters, please send a communication talisman. Zhong Tianyao bowed and saluted. He didn't hesitate any longer and hurriedly walked out. Not to mention, Zhong Tianyao thanked the heavens for sending Xiao Hua to Zhongling Mountain Villa, but when Xiao Hua saw Zhong Tianyao slip out so nimbly, he was stunned in his heart. Damn it, this is Zhongling Mountain Villa. If it's not Myriad Thunder Valley, why do I feel like I'm the master of this place? Immediately, Xiao Hua released his divine sense and examined the restriction above the earth fire. Ever since Xiao Hua set up many arrays in Tianmen Mountain, his array formation skills had advanced by leaps and bounds. He had also recovered some of his previous memories, especially the progress of the rabbit array formation. It could be said that his array formation skills had reached a new height. The restrictions on the Zhongling Mountain Villa's earth fire couldn't help but be said to be formidable. In any case, in the eyes of everyone else, it would probably take a few more days to comprehend the restrictions on the Zhongling Mountain Villa's earth fire. In the eyes of Xiao Hua's divine sense, Buddhist sense, and Dharma eyes, the array that already had a flaw wasn't in Xiao Hua's eyes. In merely 10 days' time, Xiao Hua had broken through the restriction and placed a new restriction. Furthermore, he had also refined the control card and handed it over to Zhong Tianyao. Seeing Zhong Tianyao holding the magic tablet with deep gratitude, Xiao Hua laughed inwardly. He himself understood that with the 5 elements artifact refining arts, artifact refinement didn't necessarily need to be restricted to earthly fire. All 5 elements could be used. In fact, it was not necessary to use earth fire in the fire refining technique. Zhong Tianyao definitely had yet to comprehend the entire artifact refinement method, which was why he viewed this earth fire with such importance. Using earth fire to refine artifacts was already inferior. How could it be used to refine high-grade artifacts? Although Zhong Peiyuan had already returned and had even brought back the materials to repair the Zhong family's ancestral artifact, Xiao Hua didn't pay attention to these matters. Instead, he sat in the quiet room and spat out the icicle jus flame that he had been nourishing for a long time. The icicle jus flame in his hand was neither fast nor slow as it danced before Xiao Hua's eyes like a dancing fairy. Great, Xiao Hua sighed in his heart. He had always wanted to repair the cloud-suppressing seal, but only today had all the conditions been gathered. It was now time to give it a try. Xiao Hua waved his hand and many materials flew to the ground. The cloud-suppressing seal also rotated out with a rumbling sound and steadily stopped in midair. Xiao Hua waved his hand again and took out several jade slips. He first glanced at them and pondered in his heart. Soon after, he waved his hand confidently and several wisps of icicle jus flame were separated and burned on the cloud-suppressing seal. Immediately after, Xiao Hua methodically threw more than a dozen materials into the icicle jus flame one after another. Seeing the green smoke continuously rising from it, Xiao Hua knew that this was the impurities within the tempering materials. Xiao Hua's artifact refinement took more than 10 days. Zhong Tianyao and the others were rather anxious in their hearts. However, Xiao Hua had already made it clear before the artifact refinement that if he didn't leave the quiet room, no one was to disturb him. Therefore, Zhong Tianyao would come to the artifact refinement area almost every 2 days to check if Xiaohua had already come out. On this day, Zhong Tianyao saw that Xiaohua still hadn't made any movements. Just as he was about to turn around, he heard a dragon roar behind him and a swift and fierce aura rushed over. Ouch! Needless to say, Zhong Tianyao already knew that it was Xiaohua who had completed the refinement. Without waiting for him to turn around, he saw a mass of bronze-colored brilliance flash past the top of his head. The extremely dazzling brilliance was like an unfolding lotus, and stopped in front of him. Wu, a dragon head that still looked somewhat mottled above the lotus, suddenly opened its mouth. The abnormally heavy copper seal under the dragon head flashed with veins. Heaven and earth's spiritual energy rapidly condensed, and small hurricanes were actually born in midair. Hiss! Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal's heavy might, Zhong Tianyao unconsciously sucked in a breath. He always thought that Xiaohua was repairing some artifact, but he didn't expect that it was actually a magic treasure. A damaged magic treasure? How could ordinary cultivators dare to have ideas about it? Perhaps only middle-stage core formation cultivators or even late-stage core formation cultivators would dare to attempt it. Congratulations, fellow Taoist Xiao. Zhong Tianyao's face was piled with smiles as he turned around and cupped his hands. Behind Zhong Tianyao, Xiaohua's body flew out. His face carried a trace of arrogance. Of course, he was very proud of himself for being able to finish repairing a magic treasure the first time. Return, Xiaohua beckoned with his hand. The cloud-suppressing seal gradually shrunk and returned to Xiaohua's hand. However, the majority of the bottom of the cloud-suppressing seal had already been repaired. The dragon head was also repaired a lot, but its appearance was still unclear. Xiaohua knew that he didn't have the refining method of the cloud-suppressing seal. These repairs were mostly to repair the edges and could increase the cloud-suppressing seal's might. However, if he truly repaired it completely, without the refining method of the cloud-suppressing seal, it was absolutely impossible. Fellow Taoist Xiao, this magic treasure is truly formidable. When it was damaged, it could still resist a core formation cultivator. Now, I'm afraid it can directly smash a core formation cultivator to death. Zhong Tianyao complimented. Xiaohua repeatedly waved his hand. Not at all, not at all. I'm just practicing with this thing. How could it have the might that fellow Taoist Zhong spoke of? Zhong Tianyao watched Xiaohua put away the cloud-suppressing seal, and a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. He smiled apologetically. This magic treasure, this old man thinks it's somewhat familiar. I seem to have seen it somewhere before, or perhaps heard of it. Chapter 2132. Xiaohua nodded slightly and didn't reply. Zhong Tianyao tactfully extended his hand, opened a storage pouch, and handed it to Xiaohua. Fellow Taoist Xiao, this is what third brother obtained from the auction in Ocean City. There are also the 7 rare materials that fellow Taoist took out last time. Xiaohua extended his hand and received it. He scanned it with his divine sense and took out a jade slip. He smiled and said, "What is this?" It's naturally the refining method of my Zhong family's magic tool. If fellow Taoist wants to help I repair my magic tool, this thing is indispensable. Zhong Tianyao said with a smile. Xiaohua frowned slightly. He didn't examine it, but probed. Could it be that the Zhong family's magic tool is so heavily damaged? What does fellow Taoist Xiao think? Zhong Tianyao smiled extremely slyly. He clapped his hand again and took out a magic tool that looked like a bamboo cane. There was a pigeon-like immortal bird on top of the bamboo cane. Xiaohua scanned it with his divine sense and immediately knew that there was an extremely deep crack on the bamboo cane. Moreover, a small half of the immortal bird was also missing. He could see the inside of the immortal bird's body with a glance. Alas, no wonder there are so many rare materials. Xiaohua sighed. The degree of damage of this magic tool was definitely more serious than he imagined. From the looks of it, the magic tool's array might also need to be repaired. Fellow Taoist Zhong, this Xiao was a bit careless. Xiaohua said with a smile. If I can't repair it, fellow Taoist Zhong shouldn't blame this Xiao. Of course not. Zhong Tianyao smiled apologetically. Actually, to tell fellow Taoist Xiao the truth, although this old man has already prepared for over 100 years, although the materials have already been gathered, the reason why I didn't dare to make a move is because this magic tool is too heavily damaged. If this old man didn't obtain this refining method, I wouldn't have pondered about this matter. However, since there is such a condition, this Zhong naturally has to make a move. However, fellow Taoist Xiao definitely knows better than this old man that to repair this kind of magic tool, I'm afraid that just refining techniques alone won't be enough. This old man has also seen fellow Taoist Xiao's restriction techniques. Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to decline. Even if fellow Taoist Xiao fails in any way, this old man will definitely not say anything. Alright, although Xiao Hua's expression was somewhat difficult, he was actually eager to give it a try in his heart. Repairing this kind of magic tool was no different from refining it from scratch. He really wanted to see if he could succeed in refining it. If there are any leftover materials in the storage bag, please accept them, fellow Taoist Xiao. It's more or less a token of my appreciation. Zhong Tianyao smiled again and said, however, because the formation within the jade slip involves my Zhong clan, I hope that fellow Taoist Xiao will keep it a secret. Xiao Hua nodded. I know my limits. Half a year later, in the guest hall of Zhongling Villa, Xiao Hua sat at the head of the table with a smile on his face. Zhong Tianyao's face was even more excited as he sat beside him. He really couldn't restrain the excitement in his heart. It was also just a moment ago that Xiao Hua suddenly came out from the place where he was refining artifacts and gave him a completely repaired artifact. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Zhong Tianyao said respectfully, This old man really didn't expect that fellow Taoist would be able to repair my Zhong clan's magic tool so quickly. This is truly beyond my expectations. Fellow Taoist Zhong, did you think that this Xiao would break the artifact? Xiao Hua said with a smile. I won't hide it from fellow Taoist Xiao. This old man really did have such concerns that day. Zhong Tianyao nodded and said, however, if fellow Taoist Xiao can't succeed, this old man will definitely not succeed. Therefore, this old man staked everything on this one throw. That artifact, can it be used? Xiao Hua asked. And it can definitely be used. Zhong Tianyao nodded. This old man has already used a special method to test it. There's no problem. That's good. Xiao Hua stretched and said, since that's the case, this Xiao can be considered to have finished dealing with the Zhong clan's matters. This Xiao still has to accompany my wife on her travels. At this moment, in the guest hall, Zhong Peiyuan and Zhong Peifu were respectfully accompanying Xue Xue. Their faces were also filled with excitement. Zhong Yejing shouldn't have come, but at this moment, she was also accompanying Xue Xue. Zhong Tianyao glanced at the smiling Xue Xue and said, accompanied by a beauty, traveling to the ends of the world. This old man also had such a refined interest 100 years ago. Now that I'm old. At this point, Zhong Tianyao's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He had a question in his heart. This Xiao Hua looks so young. He must have taken something to preserve his youth. How old is he now? Based on his cultivation, he shouldn't be much younger than I, right? Fellow Taoist Zhong has the heavy burden of the Zhong clan on your shoulders. Even if you want to leave, you can't, right? Xiao Hua smiled and then said to Zhong Yejing, I wonder how the fine seeds the Xiao entrusted to the Zhong clan are doing now? Zhong Yejing smiled apologetically and said, this junior has already seen it a few times. The Zhong clan's disciples in Yun City all followed Senior Zhao's instructions and gave these fine seeds to the secular world to sow. There were no mistakes. And that's the best. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He reminded again, these fine seeds will probably be commonly used in my Xiaoyu continent in the future. At this time, the old and the new are replaced, and it's the best way to make money. This Xiao will give this to your Zhong clan. If the secular disciples can make some money, this Xiao won't stop them. However, this definitely can't let the poor people not get the fine seeds because of this. When Zhong Yejing heard this, she was slightly stunned. After thinking carefully for a moment, she suddenly understood. She immediately stood up and said, This junior really doesn't understand this kind of secular matter. Since senior said so, this junior will go and supervise. If this happens, this junior will punish severely. Good. Xiaohua clapped. This merit will also belong to the Zhong clan. Then he stood up and looked at Xue Xue. He said, "Wife, our matter here has been settled. This husband will accompany you to QC." Good. Xue Xue naturally became happy. Zhong Tianyao urged Xiaohua to stay a few more times, but he couldn't. Thus, he called out all the Zhongling Mountain Villa's disciples and respectfully sent Xiaohua off. Zhong Tianyao very reluctantly watched Xiaohua and Xue Xue fly hand in hand into the blue sky. Zhong Tianyao immediately ordered Zhong Peifu, Zhong Peiyuan, and the others to start the awakening of the Zhong clan's disciples' bloodline. Different from the pleasant surprise of Zhong Tianyao and the others, in the courtyard where the qi refining disciples were cultivating, Zhong Haoren had a complicated expression on his face as he watched Xiaohua happily fly away with Xue Xue. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. During this period of time, Xiaohua didn't come to find Zhong Haoren for some unknown reason. Thus, the good karma between Zhong Haoren and Xiaohua had long been forgotten by the Zhong clan's disciples. And the things that happened in the past few years really made Zhong Haoren feel as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. It was only now that he truly understood what Xiaohua had asked him when he received the heavenly mending pill. At this time, he felt how childish and impulsive he was that day. Because, in just a few years, Zhong Xiuhan no longer put this young man who cared about her, loved her, and regarded her as a treasure in her eyes. At this time, because of the heavenly pill, Zhong Xiuhan's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. She had already shown her talent among the early-stage foundation establishment disciples and was surrounded by many handsome and confident foundation establishment male disciples. Each and every one of them used different methods to please her. How could she think highly of Zhong Haoren, an qi refining disciple who couldn't speak? Therefore, sympathy wasn't love, and gratitude couldn't repay love. But, husband, by doing this, aren't you being too cruel to Zhong Haoren? After leaving Zhongling Mountain Villa, Xiaohua naturally told her about Zhong Haoren's matter. It wasn't that he didn't think about Zhong Haoren. Sometimes he would also release his Buddhist awareness to check the situation in Zhongling Mountain Villa. How could he not know about the twists and turns between Zhong Xiuhan and Zhong Haoren? If there were feelings, why would they be together day and night? Xiaohua held Xue Xue's hand and said, "But if there were distractions, it would be unfair to Zhong Haoren and Zhong Xiuhan." Alas, that's right. Xue Xue sighed. With so many temptations, even if Zhong Xiuhan wanted to maintain her original heart, I'm afraid it wouldn't be easy. My wife, don't speak for Zhong Xiuhan. Xiaohua said with a smile, your husband didn't want to deal with Zhong Xiuhan. Everything was Zhong Haoren's choice. Since he has done it, he shouldn't regret it. Moreover, your husband can faintly see my own shadow in him. If he can persevere in his cultivation, your husband's restriction on him will definitely not last for too long. At that time, he will be able to rise from the ashes. With this experience in the mortal world, his state of mind will definitely be perfect, and it will definitely be useful for his future cultivation. My husband now has the demeanor of an almighty. Xue Xue covered her mouth and laughed. I also know that if you have the chance in the future, you will definitely help Zhong Haoren. Your husband indeed has this plan. Xiaohua said thoughtfully, it's really not easy to find an upright and plain-spoken person with a firm mind. But could it be that my husband has other arrangements for Zhong Haoren? Xue Xue suddenly realized. To tell you the truth, your husband has an idea. Xiaohua also nodded and concealed it. Xue Xue said with a smile, then I will wait and see if Zhong Haoren can enter my husband's eyes. Immediately, Xue Xue rolled her eyes and said with a smile, this senior Zhong is also interesting. From what you said, he didn't hold back and handed over the Zhong family to you. When did he become so generous? Xiaohua curled his lips. The generous one is your husband. Your husband gave him the storage bag of Fei Xiqing from Jiqing's Fei family. If he thanked your husband hysterically, would he still have a conscience? It can't be. My husband actually gave him all the spirit stones and other things? Shue covered her mouth and pretended to be shocked. How is that possible? Xiaohua waved his hand disdainfully. I didn't give any spirit stones or pills, but I gave all the tokens and jade slips to old Ghost Zhong. If old Ghost Zhong has the heart, he can get more than Qin Kai from Zhiqing's Fei family. I don't believe that my husband didn't leave a share for himself. Xiaohua blinked and said in a low voice, My wife, do you know what it means to take advantage of opportunities? Gidge, Shue laughed like a flower. After that, Xiaohua took Shue and didn't rush on their journey. They didn't travel in a straight line, but like before, they sent countless good seeds to the poor and destitute commoners along the way. Chapter 2133. Alas, your husband's strength is still too insignificant. The more Xiaohua did this kind deed, the more he felt powerless. This Dawn Rain continent was truly too big. Even if Xiaohua traveled every day, it was impossible for him to spread the seeds throughout the entire Dawn Rain continent. Yes, I've also been considering this recently. Shue's heart ached for Xiaohua, and she said considerately, Husband, you should think of a good idea. Husband alone definitely can't save all the people of Dawn Rain continent. Immortal alliance? Xiaohua suddenly realized. However, just as he finished speaking, he mocked himself. Your husband is merely a foundation establishment cultivator. I don't even know where the Immortal Alliance is. What right do I have to find them? It's not just that. Shue shook her head as well. I've occasionally heard masters say that the Immortal Alliance only appears when the Dao sect is in danger of being exterminated. They don't care about the life and death of ordinary sects, let alone the common people. Why don't we find the sect master and ask? Xiaohua probed again. Shue hesitated and bit her lips. Although she didn't say anything, her expression didn't show that she agreed with Xiaohua's words. Forget it, Xiaohua waved his hand and said gloomily, I have a clear conscience, that's it. While speaking, Xiaohua smelled a salty and moist smell from his mouth and nose. Rather unaccustomed to it, he asked curiously, why is it so smelly? Could it be that some family's salted fish has become smelly? Shue also sniffled and said, Husband, you've made a fool of yourself. We've already reached the seaside. The sea breeze blew the moist smell over. As she spoke, Shue activated her magic power and flew forward. Her fluttering clothes and fluttering hair were incomparably graceful. Female cultivators are truly unfathomable. It's just a sea? Why are they so excited? Xiaohua released his Buddhist perception and had already seen the Gui Sea 100 miles away. The waves beating against the shore practically sent the sound of the waves over. We're finally here. Xiaohua sighed inwardly. He let out a long whistle and chased behind Shue. He grabbed Shue's slender waist and rushed towards the place where the waves came from. This is the sea? Even though he'd already noticed it with his divine perception, Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh when he really saw the magnificent and boundless ocean of darkness with his eyes. The magnificence of the ocean was truly too impactful to the eye. Even if it was nether, flame forest, or ink cloud forest, it would absolutely not be as shocking as this boundless ocean. Not to mention, at this moment, it was a gentle breeze. The fine lines were like fish scales, rippling under the golden sunlight. That glittering golden scenery made the money grubber Xiaohua's eyes almost emit golden light. In addition, from time to time, tiny fish would surface from the sea, and the birds that were soaring above the sea would swoop down and devour them in one gulp. On the beach, crabs of all sizes were scurrying around, and fist-sized shells were embedded in the rocks, moving slightly. The combination of movement and stillness was truly a tranquil scene between heaven and earth. Shue landed on a protruding reef and slightly closed her eyes. She didn't have any protective yellow talismans around her body, so she let the sea breeze and the splashes of the waves wet her clothes. At this moment, Shue was wearing a pink dress. Not only did the wind blow her clothes up, wrapping around her curvy figure, even the traces of water that were gradually getting wet also revealed some spring scenery. Xiaohua didn't approach and only watched from afar. He knew that the current Xue Xue was the Xue Xue who had broken away from her shackles, the Xue Xue who dared to love and hate. Even though Xue Xue didn't release her divine perception, Xiao Hua felt that Xue Xue wanted to place this entire ocean of darkness into her bosom. I'm afraid that only such a situation can allow her to build her foundation. Xiao Hua seemed to suddenly understand the reason why Xue Xue wanted to see the sea. He also seemed to understand why Xue Xue didn't want to build her foundation. Looking at Xue Xue's intoxicated appearance, Xiao Hua once again gazed into the distance. The place where the two of them flew over was a bit remote. All around them were steep cliffs. Fishermen rarely came here, and most of them were seabirds spreading their wings. On Xiao Hua's left, a few li away, a small fishing village impressively came into view. The first thing that entered Xiao Hua's eyes was the fishing net that was spread out on the shore. A wooden frame was set up to spread the fishing net over there. Under the sunlight, it actually had a sparkling luster, looking quite majestic. There was no one around the fishing net, but there were dozens of seabirds gathered in front of the fishing net. Occasionally, they would stick their heads out to peck at something. They should be swallowing the small fish and prawns that escaped from the fishing net. Next to the fishing net, there were several small wooden boats. They weren't big, but they weren't small either. Some were laid flat, some were upside down, and there were even some that were slanted. The boats were covered in moss and were still very shabby. Presumably, they were discarded by the fishermen. It's a bit strange. Xiao Hua was puzzled. It's a sunny day now, why don't I see anyone fishing in the sea? Xiao Hua's divine sense swept through the fishing village. In the fishing village, there were many women, children, the elderly, and the weak. Strong men were rare. Many of these women, children, the elderly, and the weak had worried expressions on their faces. Although they stayed in the small huts, from time to time, they would raise their heads and cast their gazes towards the depths of Kueha Sea, as if that was where they were concerned. Oh, could it be that the fishermen have all gone fishing in the sea? Xiao Hua thought as he released his divine sense towards the depths of Kueha Sea. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept through the fishing village. In the fishing village, there were many women, children, the elderly, and the weak. Strong men were rare. Many of these women, children, the elderly, and the weak had worried expressions on their faces. Although they stayed in the small huts, from time to time, they would raise their heads and cast their gazes towards the depths of Kueha Sea, as if that was where they were concerned. Oh, could it be that the fishermen have all gone fishing in the sea? Xiao Hua thought as he released his divine sense towards the depths of Kueha Sea. After waiting for a while, Xiao Hua's lips curled into a smile. Dozens of li away, two rather large ships were slowly drifting in this direction. On the ships were dozens of men, all of them bare-chested. The decks were piled full of fish. It should be the men of this fishing village returning from a rewarding journey. Hee, no wonder they're all looking towards the sea. They probably know that today is the day they're supposed to return. Xiao Hua retracted his divine sense. Smelling the salty sea breeze, his heart suddenly felt warm. It seemed that many years ago, he had also had such expectations, and had also been anticipated by others. To be worried by others and to be worried by others. Although this kind of life is dull, sometimes it's quite interesting. Xiao Hua's heart was somewhat gloomy. Although these women and children have worried expressions on their faces, in their hearts, they have faith that their husbands will return today. But what about me? Even now, I still don't know where I was born, where my parents, where my brothers and sisters are. Chapter 2134. However, with Fairy Hong Xia and Xue Xue, Xiao Hua's gaze was filled with tenderness as he looked at Xue Xue, who was like a naughty child. I can be considered to have a place to settle down in this dawn rain continent. Just like this, Xiao Hua casually sat on the fine sand with one leg bent, one elbow on his knee, one hand holding his chin, and the other hand grabbing a handful of fine sand from the ground. With a slight tilt, the fine sand slowly slid down from Xiao Hua's hand. Over and over again, Xiao Hua did it unintentionally, but after looking at it for a long time, Xiao Hua suddenly became pensive. This sand is buried on this beach and no one knows about it. Perhaps it has been here since ancient times, or perhaps it was washed from the bottom of the sea. If I didn't come here, this sand would be silent forever. However, I came. I thought it was because of Xue Xue that I came. I grabbed this sand up high, and it slid down again and slid down again. Xiaohua's thoughts slowly drifted away. He seemed to be thinking a lot, but also seemed to be thinking very little. His comprehension seemed to be very deep, but also seemed to be very little. Xue Xue had long seen Xiaohua sitting there. She liked this kind of free aura, like this kind of fierce sea breeze. Her temperament had always been that kind of intense love and hate. However, ever since she entered the Imperial Thunder sect, for the sake of cultivation, she cut her feet to fit her shoes. Later on, for Xiaohua, she tried her best to, and she had always been doing it. She wanted to change her personality, to become a gentle and virtuous little boy. She had changed a lot now, but her heart still had some shackles. Now, her heart had merged with the sea breeze, her heart had merged with the boundless sea. She really wanted this leisure, this indulgence, this freedom to come a little more. Hua, a faintly discernible noise came over, slightly disturbing Xue Xue's thoughts. Xue Xue raised her head and saw that in a small fishing village far away, a large group of women, children, the elderly, and the weak were supporting each other as they came out of their small houses. In front of them were dozens of drooping naked little boys, stumbling as they ran. Many of them directly fell on the fine sand. However, these people's faces were filled with joy. Above the boundless sea, two indistinct masts could be seen, like two small sticks that a child was playing with. This mast was no longer a mast, but the hope and joy of all the fishermen in the fishing village. What they welcomed was the man who worked hard for their lives under the mast. Xue Xue felt a sweetness in her heart. She also looked at Xiaohua, watching as he gradually transformed from a powerless loose cultivator into a cultivator with outstanding strength who cared for the common people. Wasn't he the mast in his heart? The tranquility of the Kueha Sea was exactly like this. Everything was under the sunlight. Amidst the sound of the waves, time gradually faded away. The two masts gradually became clear, revealing two dilapidated ships. Xue Xue jumped down from the reef. She didn't urge her magic power. Instead, she walked slowly, step by step, across the beach. Her slender footprints were left on the beach, winding and firm. Xue Xue walked to about 10 zhang away from Xiaohua. She sensed Xiaohua's abnormality again. The sea breeze blew past his body as if it didn't exist. Xiaohua's hand was still constantly grabbing the fine sand, tilting the fine sand. However, the fine sand was lifted up by the sea breeze and passed through Xiaohua's body. At this time, Xue Xue was already accustomed to the strange sight. She knew Xiaohua was comprehending a cultivation method, so she sat on the ground with a smile hanging on the corner of her mouth. However, there was some love in her eyes, some reluctance, and even some pain. She knew that now that her feelings had been released, she was afraid she would soon be able to build her foundation. As for building her foundation, Xue Xue had an indescribable feeling. On the surface of the sea, regardless of the distance, it was like looking at a mountain and running a horse to death. Although the masts were already in sight, by the time the entire ship could be clearly seen, it was already sunset. At this time, the sea scenery was different. The orange sunlight dyed the sky to the west. Countless clouds formed various shapes, decorating the sky. The waves were a bit big. Fragments of red were accompanied by more and more darkness, sprinkling on the surface of the sea. Many seabirds gradually returned to the tide, carrying the day's fatigue. The slowly moving ship dragged the shadow on the side, also carrying the hard work of the fishing village's men. However, even if dusk came, even if the wind and waves were big, even if it was getting colder, the fishing village's women still held their children's hands in their hands. They allowed the shadow to grow longer and longer, but they still waited on the shore. It seemed that if this was not the case, their worries would not be eased. But at this time, a few miles ahead of the two ships, a fierce rumbling sound suddenly rang out, and a large wave of water soared into the sky along with the sound. Without waiting for the wave to fall, dozens or even hundreds of figures flew out from the sea. They were actually divided into two groups of cultivators fighting. The dozens of cultivators in front rushed out of the Kuei Sea. The water-blue brilliance around them swayed slightly, sending out strange ripples under the setting sun. The cultivators chasing behind them were dressed in all kinds of different colors, and the magic tools in their hands were also strange. In particular, the cultivators chasing after them were all valiant, far from the cultivators in front of them. A loud voice rang out, "Fellow Taoists, why are you forcing us so hard? We are all itinerant cultivators, and we are just traveling near the Kuei Sea. The sea beasts we killed before were all obtained casually. Fellow Taoist, please understand." A forthright female cultivator's voice rang out. A middle-stage Foundation establishment female cultivator with thick limbs and rough skin raised her voice. "Boy, why are you acting like a bunch of brats in front of me? I've been watching you for half a year. You said that you were training, but you just wandered around the Kuei Sea every day. I don't see you cultivating, but you caught a lot of sea beasts. You have a good harvest these days, right?" Tiske, fellow Taoist Co. A man with bronze-colored skin who was also in the middle stage of Foundation establishment sneered and said, "What's the point of talking to these cultivators with evil intentions? They dare to use the name of itinerant cultivators to hunt sea beasts, so they must be disciples of some aristocratic family or sect. Anyone with a discerning eye can tell with one look. How can itinerant cultivators reach Foundation establishments so easily? Moreover, they are still wandering around the Kuei Sea. Why aren't they cultivating?" Fellow Taoist Yang is right. Another thick man with a big axe in his hand shouted with a big black face full of whiskers, "The women of Xingming Island are too weak. In my opinion, they should have been killed long ago. Why the hell should I care about them? Awakening Island only knows how to kill. Can't you be a little more refined? The reputation of our overseas islands has been ruined by you." A male cultivator wearing a sparse Confucian robe said in a refined manner. "Bang," the thick man spat, "you sure are refined. Do you think the number of sea beasts killed by your Tiger Spine Island is small? I heard that Tiger Spine Island's blood tiger mental cultivation technique requires the blood of sea beasts to reach large success. Who knows how many sea beasts' blood you need to reach Foundation establishment? Damn it, you actually dare to be refined in front of me." The four cultivators from the overseas islands were talking with fervor and assurance. They were Xingming Island's Ko Qinglian, Awakening Island's Xiang Wenqing, Awakening Islands by Min, and Tiger Spine Island's Ding Xuan. They were the leaders of the disciples sent by the four surrounding sects. Looking at their appearance, they seemed to have a card up their sleeves and were not worried at all that the so-called itinerant cultivators would run away. Looking at the itinerant cultivator who was talking with them just now, he actually had a normal expression and did not seem worried at all. Although there were only a few early-stage Foundation establishment disciples among the dozens of cultivators following behind him, they were the same as the itinerant cultivator and even had a sneer on their face. "Don't talk nonsense." Ko Qinglian was a female cultivator after all. She was the first to notice that something was wrong and transmitted her voice. "These dozens of cultivators look unfamiliar. They don't seem to be Meng country's disciples. Moreover, they are too calm. There are only 5 early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators. They are not a match for us at all. But just now, they clearly had the strength to run away. Why did they stop here? Why didn't they go ashore?" Madam Ko is too cautious." The refined Ding Xuan was no longer refined at this time. He licked his lips and laughed. "In the eyes of mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators like us, these are just children. What tricks can they play? Meng country's cultivator families and sects all know the rules of our Go He Hai. Which one of them did not follow the rules? Even if they are disciples of some family, if they are killed by us, then so be it. What tricks can they play? Good. Since that is the case, let's kill all these cultivators." Hearing this, Bai Min could no longer hold back. He waved his thick arms and the big axe actually summoned a shadow. It flashed with a trace of sharp light and chopped towards an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator dozens of feet away. Seeing Bai Min attack, everyone was stunned. According to their original plan, they still wanted to find out the details of these cultivators and see what they were planning to do. But since Bai Min attacked, they had no choice but to attack as well. They could only wave their hands and order their disciples. The disciples received the order. Regardless of whether they were Qi refinement or foundation establishment cultivators, all of them activated their yellow talismans and magic tools. Rays of blue light flashed around everyone. Most of the disciples of the overseas islands had a water attribute physique. Their magic tools and yellow talismans were also of the water attribute. The water attribute spiritual Qi of heaven and earth around Gohi Hai flocked together with the magic seals. It was not a big deal for one cultivator to cast a magic seal. It was also not a big deal for 10 cultivators to cast a magic seal. However, with dozens of cultivators, and even a few mid-stage and early-stage foundation establishment cultivators' magic seals, the amount of spiritual Qi of heaven and earth absorbed was much more. Following the flow of spiritual Qi of heaven and earth, fine winds were produced. And these fine winds were gradually strengthened during the rising tide of the evening. Borrowing the strength of the wind, the rising tides and waves were also larger. "Let's go!" When the rogue cultivator saw this, a trace of nervousness appeared on his face. His eyes looked around as if he was looking for something. Then his eyes lit up. With a wave of his hand, he flew towards the two ships drifting in the wind and waves. To be continued. Chapter 2135. Where do you think you're going? Bai Min and the rest sneered. The Dharma artifacts in their hands had already flown out. Not only did the Dharma artifacts spill out blue light, even the seawater above the Kuai He Sea was drawn into the air by their Dharma artifacts, condensing into water pillars and smashing towards the disciples who were flying. Rise, the several foundation establishment cultivators who were guarding behind the itinerant cultivators saw how powerful the attacks were and hurriedly stopped. They looked at each other and secretly nodded. Then, they waved their hands at the same time and a ladle-like Dharma artifact appeared in each of their hands. The few of them activated the Dharma artifacts in unison. But when the Dharma power reached out, the ladles suddenly disappeared and turned into several black holes. A huge suction force was born from the black holes. Not only did the light of Bai Min and the rest disappear into the black holes, even the water pillars that were drawn by the others also fell into them. Even huge waves were raised on the Kuai He Sea and these huge waves were sucked in by the black holes. Ah? What Dharma artifact is this? Ko Qinglian was slightly shocked and quickly scanned with her divine perception. What kind of itinerant cultivators can this be? Bai Min snorted and clenched his fist. He activated his Dharma power and said angrily, "Which sect wants to go against the overseas islands? I want to see how powerful your Dharma artifacts are." As Bai Min activated his Dharma power, waves of monstrous waves flew up from the sea that was no longer calm and smashed towards the itinerant cultivators. That's right, I also want to see how powerful this Dharma artifact is in the hands of a few foundation establishment initial stage brats. Ding Xuan also cursed and actually gave up on the Dharma incantation that he was good at. Like Bai Min, he activated the waves and poured them towards the few black holes. Alright, I also want to see. Ko Qinglian also laughed. They were all overseas cultivators. It was normal that they didn't know other Dharma spells, but who didn't know the art of controlling water? Who would be worse than who? Instantly, more than 10 water dragons were born on the surface of the water and entered the black holes. It had to be said that the strategy of the cultivators from the outer sea islands was truly impressive. In the blink of an eye, just as the other cultivators shot out a wave of yellow talismans, there was a loud rumble. The top of the head of a foundation establishment cultivator on the left trembled. The cultivator's face turned red and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was dispirited as he fell into the sea like a leaf and was instantly submerged by the turbulent waves. Above the foundation establishment cultivator, a black and white light flashed and ripples formed in the air. A stream of water gushed out like a waterfall. At the same time, the faces of the other foundation establishment cultivators changed slightly. Useless thing. A light reprimand sounded. In the space about 10 feet away from the crowd, a burst of light flashed and the figure of a middle foundation establishment cultivator gradually appeared. This cultivator had already appeared and immediately formed a strange Dharma seal with his hands. A hazy light flashed and pounced on the water. With a crunching sound, the falling water actually froze. Following the surge of black and white light, the ice was once again submerged into the black holes. Who is fellow Taoist? Seeing this, Ding Xuan's face was slightly startled. He cupped his hands and asked, "Could it be that you're with these rogue cultivators?" Ding Xuan emphasized the word rogue cultivator. Unfortunately, the cultivator didn't pay attention to him and only urged his Dharma Chi to maintain the black holes. At this time, how could Ding Xuan and the others not know that there was a powerful cultivator among them? There was no need for others to say anything. Bai Min waved his hand and the big axe swung out again. This time, there was no afterimage. The huge axe split the water and directly attacked the waist of the cultivator. With such a fierce momentum, no one doubted that as long as the axe struck, not to mention the light protecting the body, even if there was some kind of spiritual armor protecting the body, this cultivator would be seriously injured. The eyes of the cultivators from the various islands were all fixed on the axe, trying to see if the cultivator was going to dodge or maintain his transcendent treasure. Suddenly, from the side, a thin flying sword, like a nimble flying snake, silently pierced towards Bai Min in the midst of the already tumbling waves. Damn it! Where did this shameless person come from? That flying sword was very vicious. Bai Min didn't dare to put his life in the hands of Ding Xuan and the others. He had no choice but to turn the axe around and forcefully chop down. That flying sword wasn't afraid of Bai Min's great strength. It raised its head and was about to stab Bai Min's wrist. Dang! Bai Min's shadow slightly slanted and struck the flying sword. The flying sword was slightly knocked away, but Bai Min's axe had already turned around. As Bai Min's eyes stared at a place in the space in front of him, he activated his magic power and the axe brought up a wave that soared into the sky. Each drop of water contained a very strong force and struck towards that place in the void. With a light laugh, the invisibility talismans of the mid-foundation establishment cultivators who weren't tall were also destroyed by Bai Min's attack. As the cultivators made hand seals, their flying swords flew back to save themselves and turned into rainbows to chop at the big axe. There's something wrong. At this time, a second mid-foundation establishment cultivator appeared. Ko Qinglian and the others felt different from before and increasingly felt that things were not good. At this time, other than the foundation establishment cultivators fighting each other, the aura refinement disciples were trading yellow talismans back and forth. Many disciples had already died. On the surface of the sea, dark clouds suddenly rose. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was disturbed and chaotic, and the waves surged. The cultivators naturally didn't care. They were all flying in the air. The two ships had long stopped and even dropped their anchors. Everyone's faces were pale and they were trembling. They looked up at the people fighting not far away. The entire ship was rocking in the waves. The ship, which originally looked quite big, was now almost like a toy. Looking at the women and children on the beach, everyone had a miserable expression on their faces. Many people were paralyzed on the ground and sobbing silently. The fishermen were admittedly innocent, but when the city gate caught fire, the fish in the moat would also suffer. They just happened to be passing by this place, so how could they escape? Xue had seen it long ago, but she was an aura refinement cultivator and simply couldn't intervene. As for Xiaohua, he was currently comprehending karma. His hand was constantly grabbing sand and then pouring it down in torrents, over and over again, repeating over and over again. Xue's face gradually became anxious. Because at this time, 5 mid-foundation establishment cultivators had already appeared one after another. They held the 5 black hole-like magic tools in their hands and blocked in front of Xiang Wenqing and the others. Fellow Taoists, why is this? Xiang Wenqing's eyes turned rapidly. He cupped his hands and said, "Could it be that there's a misunderstanding? We Xian Le sect disciples only came to this coastal area to travel, But you're chasing us so relentlessly. Didn't you always want to know why we came? I'll tell you right now. The cultivator in front raised his head and laughed loudly. Xian Lusek disciples? Xiang Wenqing frowned and immediately exchanged glances with Ko Qinglian and the others. Everyone was puzzled. How could Xian Lusek disciples see these small fish and shrimps? Chapter 2136. However, I and the others originally didn't want to reveal our faces. But you all just had to force us like this. That cultivator sneered again. Since that's the case, I and the others have come. I'll let you all see I's true face. Oh, so it's like this. Ko Qinglian smiled and bowed. Since you're fellow Taoists from Immortal Music Sect, then we naturally won't pursue this matter. We'll have to trouble you. That's right, Immortal Music Sect has a very good relationship with my overseas islands. Fellow Taoists, you're only here to travel. We've misunderstood you. This doesn't count as anything. We'll leave now. Fellow Taoists, please do as you please. Xiang Wenqing also smiled. Fellow Taoists, isn't it too late to leave now? That cultivator laughed loudly. My Immortal Music Sect actually values you little sea beasts from Guihe Sea? My Immortal Music Sect discovered. But before this cultivator finished speaking, a cultivator beside him frowned and said, "Third junior brother, aren't you talking too much?" "Yes, little brother understands." That cultivator immediately shut his mouth and waved his hand. Fellow senior brothers, since these cultivators have seen our whereabouts, then we'll do as the seniors said. Leave no one alive. Hearing this cultivator's command, the 5 Foundation Establishment middle stage cultivators' bodies flashed with a blue brilliance. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth were all absorbed into their bodies. Go. Ko Qinglian and the others didn't dare to say anything more. They knew that they'd already fallen into the others' trap. Hearing everyone's loud shout, they urged their magic power and their bodies overflowed with brilliance. They were about to escape into the water. Rise. Hearing that Foundation Establishment middle stage cultivators' low rebuke, the 5 cultivators simultaneously sat cross-legged in midair. Their hands formed extremely strange seals. Rays of blue light surged and rushed into the seals. Following that, rays of blue flowers flew out from the seals and rushed into the black hole from before. Moo, 5 consecutive sounds like a bull tearing at something rang out. That black hole suddenly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it grew from a small dot to a few feet in size. At this moment, what flew out from that black hole were palm-sized snowflakes. These snowflakes were different from the snowflakes falling from the sky. They were like a torrential downpour, spinning and covering the sky as they fell towards the surrounding space of several thousand feet. In an instant, the temperature within the area of several hundred feet where the cultivators were fighting dropped rapidly. Ice shards condensed in the air and fell into the sea. The surging waves were still moving at first, but in just a few seconds, they froze. Kacha-kacha. Sounds that sounded like ice being frozen gradually spread from the surface of the sea to the bottom of the sea. Ding Shuwen and the others had just fallen into the water and were about to escape when the power of the ice was transmitted, freezing the seawater within 1,000 feet. They couldn't help but be shocked. What kind of calculation was this? What kind of great effort was this? However, they weren't in a hurry to think too much about it. They hurriedly turned around and flew out of the frozen sea. One by one, their eyes turned red. They activated their magic tools and fiercely attacked the 5 cultivators who still had their eyes closed and were circulating their magic power. The tall and skinny cultivator who spoke first widened his eyes slightly and waved his hand. 4 rays of light flashed past and pierced towards Ding Shuwen and the others. Wherever the light passed, the ice shards in the air formed along with the light and attacked the 4 of them like 4 slender flying swords. Pang! The ice shards didn't have any resistance against the 4 people's magic tools and shattered upon contact. However, the shattered ice shards flew in all directions. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth around the magic tools turned into ice shards. In a short period of time, the 4 people's water-type magic tools began to freeze. This is bad. Bai Min secretly panicked. He already felt that the magic power inside the magic tools had condensed and couldn't be controlled freely. He knew that in a short moment, the magic tools would lose control. What should we do? Bai Min hurriedly spread out his divine sense and looked around. However, at this moment, the dozens of Qi refinement disciples from the 4 islands who had escaped into the water were unable to fly out of the ice. It was obvious that they were all sealed under the sea. The seawater under their feet had already completely frozen into ice. The dark green ice was as clear as crystal and was extremely beautiful. However, this was far from the end. What was even more frightening was still around them. Within a radius of several hundred meters, strands of blue brilliance flashed, and streaks of white ice formed, gradually condensing in midair. A kind of power that could confine the surroundings was born from the previous 5 black holes. It can't be that everything within a radius of 1,000 feet has been frozen, right? Bai Min came to a realization and still couldn't believe it. Damn it, if we don't leave now, when will we? Bai Min's figure suddenly flew up and flew towards the 2 ships in the distance. At this moment, the 2 ships were still not sealed in the layer of ice. They were only at the edge of the ice seal. Although the 2 ships had already dropped their anchors, how could the waves in the hands of the cultivators be suppressed by the anchors of the mortal ships? One of the ships was already in imminent danger. Now, with the help of the cultivator's divine sense, the frozen layer of ice raised another wave. This wave was even higher and bigger than the previous one. With just a wave, the ship was overturned and collapsed like a small wooden boat. The entire ship immediately fell apart, and the dozens of fishermen on the ship inevitably fell into the water. A series of miserable cries could be heard. If it were any other time, the fishermen wouldn't be too shocked even if they fell into the water. However, at this moment, the seawater was about to freeze. The coldness of the seawater was far beyond their imagination. The moment they fell into the water, their limbs stiffened and they couldn't move. Many of the fishermen began to sink into the water. Of course, although the fishermen on the other ships were so cold that their teeth were chattering, they didn't dare to be negligent. They threw out wooden logs and other objects, trying to save the fishermen who had fallen into the water. Seeing Bai Min escape, the other 3 didn't think too much. They flew in 4 different directions, trying to escape this calamity. Out of the 5 cultivators, 4 of them opened their eyes. With a wave of their sleeves, they each stretched out their index fingers and pointed at the black holes in front of them. With a series of cracking sounds, a layer of pure white ice rapidly formed several feet in front of Bai Min and the other 3, blocking their flight path. Fight! Other than Bai Min, Ko Qinglian and the others all threw out the magic tools in their hands. All the magic power in their bodies surged into the magic tools. They knew that if they didn't do their best now, they wouldn't have another chance in the future. Ping, ping, ping. 3 loud sounds rang out. The magic tools hit the layer of ice and broke it. However, when the 3 figures flew into the layer of ice and were about to escape, the layer of ice condensed again. It was extremely easy to freeze the 3 people and their magic tools in the layer of ice. Looking at Bai Min again, he suddenly put his magic tool into his storage bag. He suddenly slapped his forehead and a yellow flame appeared. From his mouth, he actually spat out a fist-sized fire bead. That fire bead emitted a blazing flame and rushed into the layer of ice. Bai Min's magic power wasn't weaker than the 5 strange cultivators. However, he fell into their trap and his magic tool was restrained. Now that he took out a fire-type magic tool, it naturally broke the layer of ice in an instant. His figure also broke out of the layer of ice. Right now, it wasn't just a layer of ice anymore. It should be an exquisite ice palace. Seeing Bai Min escape, the 5 cultivators weren't surprised at all. There was even a hint of laughter in their eyes. However, one of the cultivators on the left sneered and stood up. He slapped his hand and a bottle-shaped magic treasure flew out. A misty watery light came out of the bottle and attacked Bai Min. Bai Min was as anxious as a stray dog. He didn't look back and grabbed with his hand. The fire bead flew out and a raging flame met the attack. With a sizzling sound, the raging flame and the watery light collided. They were both sent flying. That raging flame just happened to hit the last ship. Immediately, a large hole appeared on the ship. Moreover, it began to burn. How could Bai Min and the others care about the life and death of these fishermen? The two of them waved their hands, formed hand seals, and began to fight again. Husband, husband. Shue saw clearly from afar. As early as when the first ship was destroyed, she called out to Xiaohua in a low voice. She even used her hand to push Xiaohua. However, Xiaohua turned a deaf ear to her. Shue even pushed the void just like before. What should we do? Seeing the second ship being hit again, the women and children on the shore were crying. Even a few elderly women wanted to rush into the sea to save them. Shue was abnormally anxious. When Shue's gaze fell on Xiaohua's hand, her eyes unconsciously lit up. Shue immediately reached out without hesitation and completely caught the sand that Xiaohua poured down. Shue's move was indeed useful. The seemingly motionless Xiaohua snorted. That sound was like the sound of nature that shook the entire world. Immediately, Xiaohua opened his eyes and looked at Shue. Ah? Shue naturally also looked at Xiaohua. However, when she saw Xiaohua's silver eyes, a faintly discernible hand, and a river that was as bright as the stars in his fingers, she let out a low cry. It was as if her entire gaze and person were sucked into that river. In just an instant, Xiaohua's eyes rolled, revealing human emotions. His bright black eyes returned to their original state. Shue. Xiaohua returned to normal. Looking at the deathly pale Shue, he asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Shue was grief-stricken. Her eyes were extremely sad. However, within that sadness, there was also a trace of relief and even a trace of pride. Hearing Xiaohua's call, she reluctantly squeezed out a smile. Pointing at the sea, she said, "Husband, there are people fighting there. 2 ships belonging to the secular world were destroyed. There are probably dozens of lives at stake. This concubine knows that husband is compassionate and would rather delay his cultivation to save them, so..." Okay, Xiaohua's divine sense swept over and he immediately knew what Shue was talking about. He immediately said, "This husband will go there right away." "Then husband?" Shue clenched her teeth and said, "Husband, can you give that pink jade slip to this concubine first? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for it." Chapter 2137. Good. Xiaohua didn't have time to think about it. He gave the jade slip to Shue and flew into the air towards the ship. Where did this fellow Taoist come from? Why don't I see Immortal music sect disciples here? Xiaohua's divine sense had already attracted the attention of the 5 mid-stage foundation establishment cultivators. When they saw that Xiaohua had actually flown over and was even flying towards Bai Min, the tall and thin cultivator in the lead stood up and asked coldly. When he asked, the seals in his hands were not completed. In the air, countless ice shards rapidly condensed, blocking Xiaohua's path. Scram! Xiaohua had already seen the dozens of fishermen in a critical situation. Seeing this cultivator blocking his path, he was already unable to restrain his anger. With a wave of his hand, a wall of samadhi true fire was born. That seemingly incomparably beautiful ice palace, which seemed unbreakable in the eyes of cultivators, was like snow encountering fire. It was extremely easy to burn a large passage. Moreover, this ice layer was still burning in the samadhi true fire. Samadhi true fire. That cultivator was greatly alarmed and hurriedly waved his hand. The remaining 3 cultivators all stood up solemnly. Each of their hands were about to form seals, preparing to attack Xiaohua. "Wait!" A voice that was filled with joy, doubt, and even hatred rang out. "Yes, sect master." When the 4 people heard, their faces were shocked. Immediately, they all bowed towards the source of the voice. In the air, another person's figure appeared. This person's cultivation was only at foundation establishment, but that incomparably handsome and evil-looking cultivator's eyes didn't seem to be a cultivator of the human world. This person was Zhang Qingxiao. This guy, didn't he die in the ink cloud black forest? How could he come out alive? Zhang Qingxiao looked at Xiaohua with a complicated gaze. The feeling in her heart was really indescribable. His current cultivation seems to be comparable to middle-stage foundation establishment. If he died, of course I know he has nothing to do with Master's death. However, not only did he not die, but his magic power also advanced by leaps and bounds. He's almost only a bit weaker than me. He was previously a loose cultivator. Even if he entered the Imperial Thunder sect, how could he compare to me? In that case, this guy definitely has nothing to do with Master's death. When she heard the news of Xiaohua's death, Zhang Qingxiao was very sad and cried for Xiaohua. However, now that she saw that Xiaohua wasn't dead, and that his strength was even comparable to the middle stage of foundation establishment, Zhang Qingxiao began to suspect Xiaohua instead. Looking at Xiaohua again, he didn't even look at the four cultivators. With a flash of his figure, he had already flown to the sky above the ship. Go! Xiaohua slapped his forehead, and the cloud-suppressing seal flew out with a rumbling sound. A layer of bronze light descended from the sky, and completely covered the wreckage of one ship and the other ship. Furthermore, within that ancient bronze brilliance, there were tiny scarlet-green flames faintly flowing. Under the brilliance of the suppressing cloud seal, the flames on the ship were instantly extinguished, and the ice under the ship gradually melted. Even the surging waves quickly calmed down under the brilliance of this brilliance. It was as calm as the surface of a lake. The panicked fishermen felt warmth and the calm seawater. How could they not know that someone was helping them? These fishermen were all overjoyed, and hurriedly swam in the sea. Some struggled to get on the ship, and some were busy rescuing others. Their swimming ability was excellent, and now that the wind and waves were calm, to them, it wasn't much different from flat ground. Although everyone couldn't get on the ship for a while, it was only a matter of time before they were all rescued. Xiaohua released his divine sense, and knew that all the fishermen, including those who were frozen and fell into the sea, were swimming on the surface of the sea. Only then did he feel relieved, and had time to observe everyone else. When he looked around and saw Zhang Qingxiao, his eyes unconsciously shrank and his heart jumped. Heavenly Devil Sect Master? Why is he here? However, where his divine sense passed, Zhang Qingxiao wasn't there at all. Why is it Heavenly Devil Sect again? Didn't that cultivator say it was Immortal Music Sect? Xiaohua was slightly surprised, and then he understood. Presumably, this was Heavenly Devil Sect using Immortal Music Sect's name to do some shady business here. This guy's magic power and divine abilities seem to be much stronger than the last time I saw him. This young master actually can't see his cultivation level. It seems this guy's progress is even greater than this young master's. Xiaohua pondered. Last time, there was a devil sex formation, and this time, it took a long time to set it up. Moreover, he also has 5 middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators as helpers. This matter is somewhat troublesome. Just as Xiaohua was thinking, Bai Min, who was fleeing earlier, sensed the movement here. He saw the power of Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal, and he himself was being pressured by that cultivator, so he had no choice but to turn around and return. He shouted loudly, "Fellow Taoist, help me!" Seeing this, the cultivator chasing Bai Min's face changed dramatically, and his flying speed slowed down slightly, secretly looking at Zhang Qingxiao. "Hey, why did fellow Taoist come back?" Xiaohua glanced at Bai Min and said, "If you left, you would have left. Now that you've come back, not only will you drag I down, you'll also lose your life." Bai Min cupped his hands and said, "I am Bai Min from Silicon Island." Obviously, Bai Min also just saw Zhang Qingxiao, and at the same time, he also discovered the strangeness that his divine sense couldn't see. Unconsciously, his complexion was the same as the cultivator chasing him, incomparably pale. That's right, Xiaohua was only one person, and looking at his appearance, he was only an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Although his magic weapon was powerful, how could it be compared to a cultivator whose divine sense couldn't see and whose magic technique couldn't sense cultivation? Wasn't he just trying to find a doctor when he was sick? Moreover, Xiaohua's words had a hidden meaning. Although Bai Min looked impetuous, he still muddled his way to the middle stage of foundation establishment in Guihai, so how could he not understand the meaning in Xiaohua's words? He immediately understood that his escape was deliberately done by these cultivators, and it was a part of their plan. He was so stupid to see Xiaohua, this straw, and actually walked right into their trap. They couldn't let him go even if they wanted to. Bai Min regretted it so much that he wanted to slap himself. You're actually quite smart. You actually saw the flaw in it with a glance. Zhang Qingxiao said warmly, as if he was giving pointers to a junior. Not at all. Fellow Taoist has always been far-sighted and strategizing. Since I've seen fellow Taoist once and experienced fellow Taoist methods, how could I not know? Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. Looking left and right, he carefully answered. Fellow Taoist? Pa. Zhang Qingxiao faced the sky and laughed heartily. He pointed his hand and said, Xiaohua, the first time I saw you, you seemed to have let your fellow disciples escape in order to save them. You were originally the ones who could escape the most, but you fell behind. If I didn't intend to let you go, I'm afraid you wouldn't have escaped so easily, right? And today, you still have this kind of kindness and soft-hearted heart. Chapter 2138. Even now, you're still concealing my identity. Do you think I'll let this boorish person escape? Let me see, your magic treasure has actually been repaired a bit. It's even more powerful than before. However, this magic treasure isn't protecting you right now, but instead protecting some vulgar people who are worse than pigs and dogs. You are really a good person. Zhang Qingxiao said disdainfully. Sect master? Bai Min heard and couldn't help but be stunned. He really couldn't figure out which sect Zhang Qingxiao was the sect master of. Xiaohua ignored Zhang Qingxiao's sarcasm and looked at the fishermen who were saving themselves under the cloud-suppressing seal. He said with a smile, Sect master actually still remembers me. It's really an honor. As for what I do, that's my business. It has nothing to do with your heavenly demonic sect. Heavenly demonic sect? You're the heavenly demonic sect. Bai Min suddenly realized and pointed at Zhang Qingxiao with a trembling finger. My islands have never interacted with your heavenly demonic sect. Why did you scheme to harm us? Who knew that Zhang Qingxiao simply ignored Bai Min and still looked at Xiaohua thoughtfully? She shook her head and said, I've thought for a long time, but I still can't figure out why fellow Taoist Xiao is doing this. Since you can't figure it out, then so be it. People who walk different paths can't work together. Xiaohua said coldly. That's right, these words are wonderful. People who walk different paths can't work together. Zhang Qingxiao clapped and laughed. You're the Tao, I'm the devil. Naturally, it's different. Immediately, Zhang Qingxiao seemed to have realized something and pointed at her nose. You and I can be considered old acquaintances, but I forgot to tell you, my surname is Zhang. Xiaohua waited for a moment, but seeing that Zhang Qingxiao didn't continue, he could only cup his hands and say, So it's Sect Master Zhang. I just don't know why you don't listen to the name when you have the surname. Hiding your head and tail isn't what a real man does. Real man? I've never claimed to be a real man. Zhang Qingxiao flicked her sleeves and said, What I want to do is also not what a real man does. As for my name? It won't be too late to mention it after you defeat my 5 subordinates. Go kill Xiaohua. Zhang Qingxiao turned hostile as soon as she said so, and she immediately ordered 5 middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators. Yes, sect master. The 5 of them didn't dare to hesitate. They looked at each other and rubbed their hands together. Each of them emitted a water-blue brilliance and rushed into the 5 black holes. Poof! A muffled sound rang out. It seemed like the awakening of a hibernating ice dragon. 5 sparkling and translucent ice pillars rushed out from the 5 black holes and smashed toward Xiaohua. Bai Min was close to Xiaohua. He saw that the ice dragon was like a real dragon, possessing a terrifying might. Moreover, wherever the ice dragon passed, the air would be frozen. A huge force pressed down from afar, completely imprisoning him and Xiaohua. Bai Min did not dare to be negligent and hurriedly flew to the side. The ice dragon did not care about Bai Min and completely sealed off Xiao Hua's surroundings. I'm afraid that just relying on something like this won't be a problem for me. Xiao Hua laughed heartily. Similarly, he also rubbed his hands together. Several streaks of green and red light flew out. They were precisely the fire threads of the Samadhi true fire that were like 5 small snakes. At this time, the fire threads in Xiao Hua's hands were vivid and lifelike. They had a snake head and a snake body, but their features were not clear. Go! Xiao Hua raised his arms, and 5 fire snakes roared as they rushed towards the 5 ice dragons. In a moment, they collided. Hiss! Bai Min, who was not far away, saw this and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The fire snakes and ice dragons collided, but there wasn't much of a sound. However, the strange thing was that the thin fire snakes were not annihilated by the huge size of the ice dragons. Instead, when the two came into contact, they immediately ignited the ice dragons and quickly burned towards the back of the ice dragons. In addition to the fact that the Samadhi true fire was not afraid of this ice magic, more importantly, Bai Min had already seen that the magic power contained in the fire snakes was far from what the ice dragons could compare to. In other words, Xiao Hua's magic power far surpassed his opponent. No, it was far beyond his opponent and magic formation. If Bai Min could understand, how could Zhang Qingxiao and the others not understand? It's getting more and more interesting. The smile on Zhang Qingxiao's face became wider, and hatred flashed in her smile. She secretly said, "Little junior brother, you actually have the cultivation of late-stage foundation establishment? It's only been a few years. If you didn't get some benefits from me, Shang Huaming, how could you cultivate so fast? If it wasn't related to me, Shang Huaming, how could you improve so much?" Idiot! Zhang Qingxiao's eyes flashed and she waved her big sleeve. 5 rays of light flew out and hit the ice dragons at the roots, cutting them off and preventing the fire snakes from continuing to burn. Other than fighting against ice, you don't know anything else? When the 5 cultivators heard this, they immediately flew up from their original positions and clapped their hands. 3 magic tools and 2 magic treasures were raised in the air. Since ancient times, fire has been able to subdue ice. How about I try it today? Xiao Hua waved his hand again and dozens of fireball talismans and fireball techniques were shot out, hitting a range of 100 feet. Zhang Qingxiao sneered. Since ancient times, evil can't prevail over good. I'd like to see who will have the last laugh. As she spoke, Zhang Qingxiao waved her hand and took out the blood-red flag again. It shook slightly, and this time it was even more powerful. A few faint wisps of blood-red light that were almost inaudible flew into the air and formed a net of blood threads. The net of blood threads directly covered the fireballs that Xiao Hua used his magic power to create one by one. Xiao Hua's fireballs were mixed with true Samadhi fire. Others were helpless against it, but when they fell into the net of blood, they were immediately and silently extinguished. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was not surprised. The devil sex methods had always been unexpected. His true Samadhi fire last time seemed to have no effect. However, seeing Zhang Qingxiao extinguish the true Samadhi fire so easily, Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed. Clearly, Zhang Qingxiao's progress in cultivation was also beyond his expectations. Xiao Hua paid a bit of attention to Zhang Qingxiao and didn't pay much attention to the attacks of the 5 middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators. With a wave of his hand, the soaring dragon shears flew out. A magnificent golden light flashed within 100 zhang radius. Xing xing xing, sounds rang out. 3 magical artifacts that had just gathered the spiritual energy of the water element of heaven and earth were sliced apart by the soaring dragon shears. The other 2 magical artifacts were also knocked flying into the air. The 5 balls of light that had just condensed were instantly dispersed. Wonderful! The 5 middle foundation establishment cultivators turned pale with fright. Just as they were thinking about how to deal with it, they heard Zhang Qingxiao clap her hands and laugh. Xiao Hua, I've really underestimated you. I thought that having a late foundation establishment cultivation was already pretty good, But I didn't expect you to reach the peak of the late foundation establishment stage. Moreover, you can control 2 magic treasures at the same time. It's really wonderful." As she spoke, Zhang Qingxiao clapped her hands and the bright scenic bell flew out from her storage bag. This bright scenic bell was clearly different from the first time Xiaohua saw it. Unexpectedly, it also had a dazzling golden brilliance, and that brilliance was like a golden lotus. But as soon as the golden lotus came out of the storage bag, it immediately produced an enormous suction force. The nearby spiritual energy of heaven and earth flocked towards it, giving rise to a small whirlwind. Hiss, seeing this, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. The might of this bright scenic bell's magic treasure was clearly more powerful than the cloud-suppressing seal. Moreover, that brilliance had already taken shape, and the degree of completeness of the magic treasure was also higher than the cloud-suppressing seal. Although his soaring dragon shears were powerful, it was also damaged. He didn't know if it could match up. Then let this Xiao experience sect Master Zhang's methods. Xiaohua didn't say anything further and urged his magic power. The soaring dragon shears flashed with golden light and flew towards the bright scenic bell. With a dang sound, it seemed that the ice shards in the air were swaying. Xiaohua immediately felt his vision blur for a moment, and the soaring dragon shears' golden light immediately stopped. "Quick!" Xiaohua was greatly alarmed and slightly shook his head. He felt that his head was as heavy as 1,000 caddies. He didn't dare to be the slightest bit negligent and immediately urged the soul-piercing technique. Zhang Qingxiao's Naiwen Palace suddenly felt like it was being pierced. He couldn't help but hold his head. His body also wanted to fall a little bit. And taking advantage of this moment, the soaring dragon shears swiftly flew over. With a schwa sound, like the sound of silk being cut, the bright scenic bell's golden brilliance and the lotus-like luster within the brilliance were all cut into 2 halves. "Quick!" Zhang Qingxiao reluctantly endured the pain in his Naiwen Palace and pointed his finger. The bright scenic bell's brilliance greatly increased, and the brilliance flocked over to block the soaring dragon shears. That golden light took the form of a faint lotus and surrounded Zhang Qingxiao. The 2 martial brothers of the past, the moment they met in life and death. When the lotus had just surrounded Zhang Qingxiao waved his hand and the flag that he had previously put away in his sleeve waved again. The bewitching blood-red color appeared again, and unexpectedly, it transformed into a large rock like fog and pounced toward Xiaohua. "Granny, you have quite a lot of secret techniques. I'll let you see what the secret techniques of the devil sect are," Zhang Qingxiao said, not venting his hatred. "Don't you know secret techniques? I'd like to see who's stronger." Seeing the blood-red rock, Xiaohua was somewhat hesitant. Needless to say, this was definitely the method of the devil sect. If he had the mighty Vajra Dharma body, he would be able to break it. But right now, his Buddhist Dharma body was gone, and only the Phoenix Dharma body was left. He didn't know whether it would be useful or not. But how could Zhang Qingxiao give him time to think? Although the rock didn't have any power, a dense, bloody, and austere aura had already enveloped Xiaohua. "Rise!" Xiaohua's body shook, and a phoenix cry rang out. The Phoenix Dharma body rushed out, and the power of heaven and earth filled the entire area. Zhang Qingxiao was completely dumbstruck. However, Zhang Qingxiao's face instantly revealed a sinister expression, and a real killing intent arose. He sneered and said, "Xiaohua, which cultivation sect are you from? You actually have the true blood of the phoenix." This young master is a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, not some cultivation sect. Xiaohua was somewhat baffled. "This young master has already told you. Why are you so interested in this young master's background?" Instantly, Xiaohua's face also revealed a sinister expression. His eyes slightly narrowed and he secretly said, "Could it be that this guy is related to the cultivator who sealed me?" Immediately, Xiaohua's killing intent also rose. Right now, he still didn't have the strength to break the seal. He absolutely couldn't let Zhang Qingxiao expose his strength. Chapter 2139. Looks like I have to use the spirit fire. Xiao Hua's phoenix body fluttered, the wind on his wings faintly sounded. His sharp phoenix claws could actually tear a piece of the blood-colored rock, steadily gaining the upper hand. But if Xiao Hua wants to kill Zhang Qingxiao, it's absolutely impossible without the spirit fire. Xiao Hua's figure slightly swayed, the magic power in his whole body surged. He was already prepared, the bright thunder escape was about to be activated. That wisp of spirit fire already passed out from his Buddhist heart. As long as he gets close to Zhang Qingxiao, he will definitely spit out the spirit fire without hesitation. He believes that under the scarlet spirit fire, Zhang Qingxiao will definitely turn into ashes. Zhang Qingxiao's eyes also emitted a cold light. He had already regarded Xiao Hua as a murderer who harbored evil intentions. Zhang Qingxiao also activated his secret technique. All the blood in his body rushed to his head. The bright scenic bell shook violently, and the invisible sound waves gradually expanded. Based on Xiao Hua's reaction just now, Zhang Qingxiao also has the confidence that her full-strength attack can make Xiao Hua instantly lose consciousness and kill him in one strike. The two people's killing intent suddenly appeared, the whole place sensed it. Not only was Bai Min shocked, even the 5 middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators and the dozens of aura-refining disciples scattered around the sea panicked. They have never seen the sect master with such great fanfare. It seems the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was about to be ignited. A real biting cold wind came out. At this moment, there was suddenly a change in Xiao Hua's storage pouch. A dark green brilliance unexpectedly flew out from his storage pouch, straight into the air, and immediately rushed to the right side of the sky. And immediately afterwards, a tyrannical divine sense swept over like a waterfall. Who? Zhang Qingxiao was shocked. This divine sense is not something she can compare to. This person's divine sense is far superior to hers. Nyang. Xiao Hua stared blankly again, then immediately became overjoyed. That dark green brilliance was the token that the mysterious Nyang gave him, telling him to check it after he built his foundation. After Xiao Hua built his foundation, it's not that he didn't think about it, but because he had to accompany Xue to gain experience, he didn't have the time, so he temporarily put it in his storage pouch, waiting to send Xue back to the mountain. Who knew that he would actually meet the Nyang at this time? Seeing Xiao Hua's joy, how could Zhang Qingxiao not know the severity of the situation? She no longer cared about fighting with Xiao Hua and waved her hand, ordering, "Let's go." Everyone bowed and waved their hands, hurriedly tidying up. Sect leader Zhang, don't you think it's too late to leave now? How could Xiao Hua let Zhang Qingxiao go? He activated his avatar and flew towards Zhang Qingxiao. His sharp phoenix claws flickered and blocked Xiao Hua's attack. If I want to leave, who can stop me? Zhang Qingxiao smiled maliciously. She raised her hand and flicked her finger. Ding! A bell rang. The phoenix battle form trembled rapidly and fell from the sky. Xiao Hua felt the space around him shaking again. He couldn't stand steadily. A clear and melodious sound rang out. The sound penetrated the bell and resounded in everyone's ears. Xiao Hua's ears immediately became clear, and his avatar also stabilized. Then, he withdrew it back into his physical body in an extremely dispirited manner. Can't I stop you? A rainbow-like brilliance flashed in the distance and landed in the sky above everyone. The Empress revealed her figure and coldly said, Junior Zhang Qingxiao of Heavenly Demon Sect greets Senior. Seeing this, Zhang Qingxiao didn't dare to be negligent. She pointed at the bright scenic bell and it immediately flew into her hand. She then bowed and greeted. Oh, so it's a sect leader. The Empress's beautiful eyes swept over and said, No wonder your tone is so arrogant. Hee Xiao Hua. Dyer's cute appearance appeared beside the Empress. She looked at Xiao Hua and blinked her eyes. However, she didn't say anything. Zhang Qingxiao. Zhang Qingxiao. Zhang Qingxiao. Hearing Zhang Qingxiao announce her name in front of the Empress, this name was like thunder in Xiao Hua's mind. It was even more powerful than the bright scenic bell from before. Isn't this the name of second senior brother? This guy. Could it be second senior brother? How is that possible? Although second senior brother flaunts himself as outstanding and elegant, he's still far from this guy. Moreover, although second senior brother's corpse isn't seen and we can't determine whether he's dead or alive, master and eldest senior brother are both dead. How can second senior brother live alone? Even if second senior brother is alive, it's impossible for him to have such a high cultivation. A gold core cultivator, master? That's what he dreams of. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's eyes were moist. He didn't care about Dyer's appearance. I don't dare. Zhang Qingxiao smiled apologetically and said, Junior is only talking to Xiaohua. Senior is a cultivator with profound magic power. Junior is not your opponent. I absolutely don't dare to say these words in front of you. What are you waiting for? The Empress did not take Zhang Qingxiao seriously at all. As her divine sense swept over, she saw dozens of disciples frozen in the ice layer. Senior, please no. Zhang Qingxiao hurriedly smiled apologetically and said, Junior was looking for something here. Who would have thought that these cultivators would see it? Junior was afraid of leaking the news, so I had no choice but to, Senior. Seeing this, how could Bai Min let go of this opportunity? He hurriedly stepped forward and said, This guy is the sect master of the heavenly demon sect. He intended to provoke the conflict between our outer islands and Meng country's cultivation sections. That's why he set up an ambush and used the name of Immortal music sect to kill us outer islands disciples. He even wanted to let Junior escape and spread false news. If fellow Taoist Shao didn't appear in time, this thief's plan would have succeeded. Senior should know that if our outer islands fought with Meng country's cultivation sects, tens of thousands of cultivators would die. Senior, you must uphold justice for us. Don't let this bastard escape. The Empress's expression didn't change at all. She said indifferently, I also don't know the art of divination. Who knows who is telling the truth? It's normal for cultivators to fight each other. How can one cultivate without dying? Senior's words are correct. Zhang Qingxiao rolled her eyes and said, Junior is looking for? Qiu Yinlu. How is it the ambush that this guy said? Qiu Yinlu? The Empress seemed to have heard of this name before. She asked curiously, how did Devil Monarch Qifeng's weapon end up in Dawn Rain Continent? Empress knows of true Monarch Qifeng? Zhang Qingxiao's expression changed slightly and immediately said respectfully. How could the Empress answer him? She said indifferently, if it's for this weapon, it's normal for you to seal the news. However, do you think that this Foundation establishment cultivator would know of your devil cultivator's weapon? Hehe, it's better to be safe than sorry. Zhang Qingxiao smiled apologetically. In order to not leak any information, Junior can only do this. And that's reasonable. The Empress's brows didn't crease as she said it as a matter of course. Seeing this, Zhang Qingxiao smiled apologetically again. Since Senior has already distinguished right from wrong, then can Junior leave? Senior, you must not let him go. His hands have taken the lives of many cultivators. Bai Min said anxiously. Chapter 2140. The Empress glanced at him and said with a smile, What does the lives of cultivators like you have to do with me? This. Bai Min was flabbergasted and didn't know how to answer. Thank you, Senior. Zhang Qingxiao cupped her hands and was about to fly away when the Empress said coldly, Did I allow you to leave? This. Zhang Qingxiao was also hesitant, not knowing what the Empress meant. Xiaohua, what are you doing? Naturally couldn't let the Empress speak and asked curiously, Why aren't you speaking after seeing the Empress? Xiaohua collected his thoughts and smiled apologetically. Junior suddenly thought of something else. Please forgive me, Empress. You're already at Foundation establishment. Did you forget the Empress's words? If it weren't for this servant accompanying the Empress, you wouldn't have sent out this Jasper Caltrop. Scolded as she stole a glance at the Empress. Xiaohua was anxious and hurriedly bowed. I'll let the Empress know." However, without waiting for Xiaohua to finish, the Empress waved her hand and said coldly, "I'm only asking you what happened here, don't say anything else." Xiaohua knew that the Empress was angry and hurriedly looked around. Junior also doesn't know what happened, but Junior saw that the fishermen on these two ships were about to be buried in the belly of the fish, and their relatives at the seaside were grieving inconsolably. Junior couldn't bear to see such a tragic thing happen, so Junior came to intervene, wanting to save these fishermen. As for what those two families are doing, Junior really doesn't know, and also really doesn't want to know. These lowly people? The Empress had long seen the fishing boat under the protection of Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal and was very surprised. "You want to save these lowly people?" I'll let the Empress know, Junior really does think so. The life and death of those two families has nothing to do with Junior, Xiaohua said without hesitation. For these lowly people, you can take action, but you don't care about the life and death of these cultivators. The imperial concubine chuckled. Although this concubine doesn't know what you're thinking and doesn't understand what you're thinking, this concubine will still go with the flow. As she spoke, the Empress waved the sleeve of her palace dress. A cloud surged and flew under the cloud-suppressing seal. It ignored the light of the cloud-suppressing seal and swept up the ship, the fishermen floating around, and even the wreckage of the other ship. In an instant, it flew to the shore. Seeing such a divine ability, Xiaohua's eyes unconsciously lit up. If he had such a great ability, why would he need to expend so much effort? Next, Xiaohua pointed his hand, and the cloud-suppressing seal, soaring dragon shears, and other items flew back into his hand. He bowed and said, "Junior thanks the Empress for her great kindness on behalf of these fishermen." "What are you talking about? Weren't you the one who protected them?" Although the imperial consort's tone was indifferent, it was clear that her anger had dissipated somewhat. She pointed at Zhang Qingxiao and said, "This person is a little strange. Even this consort can't see through him. Do you think this consort killed him? Or should we let him go?" Zhang Qingxiao's face instantly paled. Xiaohua's heart was beating wildly. If it was before he knew Zhang Qingxiao's name, he would definitely clap his hands and cheer without hesitation. After all, he didn't have a good impression of the heavenly demon sect. But after knowing Zhang Qingxiao's name, his first reaction was that self-righteous second senior brother of his. How could he let someone with the same name die in front of his eyes? That's right, if this Zhang Qingxiao isn't that Zhang Qingxiao, then why did he keep inquiring about my background? Or did he let me go when he could clearly trap me last time? Xiaohua suddenly thought of the first time he met Zhang Qingxiao and what Zhang Qingxiao asked. But if he is second senior brother, why did he kill me when we met this time? Do I want his life or not? But if I don't want his life, then I'll miss this good opportunity today. If I want to kill this guy in the future, I'm afraid it'll be extremely difficult. Xiaohua hesitated for a moment. Zhang Qingxiao narrowed his eyes and coldly looked at Xiaohua. He knew clearly in his heart that as long as he told the truth, Xiaohua would definitely either kill him or let him go. Since he couldn't be sure of Xiaohua's background, what was the difference between telling the truth and telling the truth? However, facing Xiaohua who couldn't be sure of his background, Zhang Qingxiao absolutely couldn't tell the truth. Just Xiaohua alone could force him to reveal the truth. How could he meet gods and kill gods, meet ghosts and kill ghosts? Suddenly, Xiaohua laughed involuntarily and said to the Empress, "Empress asked the wrong person. Didn't Junior say it already? Junior only cares about the life and death of these fishermen. The life and death of these people have nothing to do with Junior. Empress can decide for yourself." That's true. The Empress also laughed. "What does the life and death of you cultivators have to do with me?" As she spoke, she flung her sleeve and brought Xiaohua along. The three of them flew up and quickly flew to the shore. They ignored Zhang Qingxiao and the others. "Sect Master?" The 5 middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators looked at Bai Min and whispered, "What should we do?" "Go." How could Zhang Qingxiao dare to make any other plans in front of the Empress? He hastily waved his hand and brought the disciples to flee in panic. Before Zhang Qingxiao left, he still fiercely glared at Xiao Hua, who had already landed on the reef in the distance. After Zhang Qingxiao and the others of the demonic sect left, Bai Min was somewhat dumbfounded. According to his thinking, Xiao Hua or the Empress would at least save the dozens of people frozen under the ice. After all, for Xiao Hua, it was just a matter of a word. For the Empress, who seemed to have boundless magic power, it was also a piece of cake. However, he didn't expect that the two of them would throw away their responsibilities and simply ignore him. Bai Min activated his ardent pearl and barely managed to melt some of the ice. However, the ice was so hard that it was condensed by the magic weapons of the 5 middle stage Foundation establishment cultivators. His ardent pearl really couldn't do anything. In desperation, Bai Min could only look at Xiao Hua again. That's right, how could Xiao Hua, who was kind enough to save the fishermen, ignore these cultivators who were about to die? Bai Min thought for a moment, then pitifully and dispiritedly flew to the left of Xiao Hua and the others. He obediently stood there with his hands by his side and didn't say anything. As for those fishermen, they were really sad and happy at the same time. They originally thought that they were going to be swallowed by the ice water and die a violent death. However, they didn't expect that Xiao Hua would actually come out and stabilize the entire fishing boat with a cloud-suppressing seal, blocking all danger outside the brilliance of the cloud-suppressing seal. Then, like a dream, the entire fishing boat flew up and landed on the shore in the blink of an eye. It landed in front of the women and children who had almost become orphans and widows. It was hard to tell whether they were happy or sad. For a moment, the entire fishing village was in an uproar. Everyone counted their harvest and sent the women and children back to the fishing boat. A few slightly older old men, who were probably the leaders of the fishing boats, trembled and trembled as they came to the reef where Xiao Hua and the others were. They also obediently knelt on the beach and pitifully looked at the Empress and the others. Xiao Hua followed the Empress and landed on the tall cliff. He pointed at Xue Xue and said, "Empress, that's Junior's junior sister." "You have a junior sister? Didn't you say you were a loose cultivator?" Dyer blinked, but then she looked at Xiao Hua's spirit storage bag and asked, "That little Martin? And your child Xiao Huang? Is he dead?" Dyer's eyes were big and full of doubts. Her expression was somewhat unbearable, as if she was extremely afraid that Xiao Hua would say some bad news. Hee. Xiao Hua patted his spirit storage bag, but in reality he used his primordial spirit to take out Xiao Huang. He smiled and said, "Dyer, Xiao Huang is very good. He has already completely recovered. However, he is now sleeping soundly again." Dyer happily clapped her hands and jumped up. She smiled and said, "As expected, little Martin is really fine. Empress, this servant said that little Martin is at his mother's place and his heart will be at ease. He will definitely be fine." The Empress looked at Dyer's happiness and also smiled faintly. Dyer unrestrainedly reached out and wanted to pick up Xiao Huang. At this time, Xiao Huang slightly opened his eyes and looked at the scenery around him with surprise. He looked at Xiao Hua and then at Daya. Apparently, Xiao Huang still remembered Daya. He only slightly waved his tail and didn't have any reaction. He closed his eyes again. "Little Martin, why are you so sleepy? When Dyer saw you, you were already sleeping. Why are you still sleeping now?" Dyer lovingly stroked Xiao Huang's fur and said, "Yes, Empress, why is Xiao Huang always sleeping?" Xiao Hua also asked softly. They should be trying to distract the Empress' anger. And, hearing Xiao Hua's words, the Empress restrained her smile and said indifferently, "The advancement of spirit beasts is different from that of cultivators. They repair and evolve their bodies while sleeping. Don't you cultivators of the human realm also heal through closed-door cultivation? It's the same principle." Then, the Empress looked at Dyer and said with a smile, "Don't talk about little Martin. Back then you—" But halfway through she stopped. Her face showed a strange expression and said, "Dyer, give little Martin to this Empress." Dyer was a bit reluctant, but she still gave it to the Empress. The Empress took Xiao Huang and inserted a 3-colored light into it. Then she closed her eyes again. After a while, Her face showed a dignified expression. Xiaohua, what did little Martin eat after waking up? The Empress suddenly asked. Xiaohua didn't dare to hide it and told her about Yi Yuan and Jinden. The Empress thought for a moment and handed Xiao Huang to Dai. She frowned and said, "This Xiao Huang of yours is strange. Why does he call you mother? Where did you get?" Speaking up to here, the Empress glanced at Xiao Hua's Naiwen palace and said lightly, "You still don't remember. I'll let the Empress know." Xiao Hua nodded. "Junior already knows that my Naiwen palace is sealed, and my Dantian is also sealed. As for my memory, I still haven't recovered." The Empress looked at Xiao Hua with a bit of surprise and said, "I didn't expect you to build your foundation so quickly and reach the middle stage of foundation establishments so quickly. You were able to detect the seal 100 years earlier than this Empress expected." Xiao Hua. Chapter 2141. Xiao Hua knew that the Empress was asking and blushed. Just as he was about to speak, Dai asked curiously, "Empress, this servant doesn't understand." The Empress glared at Dai and said, "Speak. What exactly is little Martin?" Dai looked innocent. Dai has been thinking about it for so many years. Seeing that the Empress seemed to have discovered something, couldn't help but ask. "Can't you ask later?" The Empress's tone was slightly dignified. "This servant doesn't dare." Dai's face also turned cold, as if the Empress had discovered her thoughts, and she lowered her head slightly. "And you girl, this Empress brought you here to experience emotions. You may have some gains. Don't try to be smart." The Empress lightly warned. "Yes, this servant understands," Dai hurriedly replied. The Empress looked at Little Yellow and said, "This Empress is still somewhat confused, but this Empress is basically certain that this little Martin is not little Martin. As for what it is only a guess. Perhaps it is the Truth Listener beast." Truth Listener? Dai heard this name and trembled, throwing Little Yellow out of her hand. Fortunately, Xiao Hua was beside her and reached out to catch it. He seemed to have seen this name from somewhere before, but he didn't have any impression of it for now. And Truth Listener. It's the legendary, strange beast that can expel evil, distinguish right from wrong, and understand the secrets of heaven and earth. It's born to suck in ghosts and souls, and it's born to feed on them. The Empress enunciated each word clearly. When Xiao Hua heard this, he immediately understood where he had heard the name Truth Listener from. Wasn't it the inheritance of ghost cultivators? Truth Listener was the natural nemesis of ghost cultivators. It specialized in eating ghosts. Every malicious ghost and ghost king was Truth Listener's food. Moreover, Truth Listener could see the 9 underworlds. All the dark secrets of heaven and earth could not escape its eyes and ears. However, according to what this Empress knows, little Martin is still young. Whether it can evolve into Truth Listener depends on its luck. The Empress said again, "This strange beast is a heavenly wonder, and it is even rejected by heaven and earth. It has encountered many disasters in its life. If it is not careful, it will die. However, what puzzles me is that if little Martin is Truth Listener, I should have been able to detect it the last time. Why am I only able to detect it now? Furthermore, little Martin's form is completely different from the Harkins when it was young." Dai's panic had yet to subside. She fearfully looked at Xiao Huang and Xiao Hua's hand and said with a trembling voice, "Nyang, nyang, nyang, since it's a vicious beast, there must be something unusual about it. It's normal that Nyang Nyang doesn't know about it." You don't have to be so scared. The Harkin may be infamous for its ferocity, but how could it possibly harm you when you were young? If you befriend him now, who knows, he might be able to protect you in the future? The Empress said with a smile. Her smile was so charming that even the sea breeze became gentle. "Really?" Daphne asked in disbelief. She had almost forgotten that she was holding little Huang in her arms. "Well, don't forget that you saved his life," Xiao Hua said as he handed Goldie over. "Didn't he let you hug him when he saw you just now?" Hee, that's right." Daphne smiled, but there was still some fear in her eyes. Her arms were a little hesitant. Xiaohua smiled and placed Xiaohua in her hands. If you can't hug him properly now, you won't have the chance to hug him when he grows up. Okay. Daphne took a deep breath and took little Huang. Unlike before, there was a great deal of surprise in her eyes. After Daphne hugged little Huang, Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, Junior was just about to explain to Nyang. It's fine, I don't need any explanation. The Empress waved her hand indifferently. I just casually picked up this little marten that looks like the Harkin. It can be considered a good karma. It has nothing to do with you. A junior came out to train this time to accompany junior sister. Xiaohua knew that if he didn't explain, the Empress wouldn't forgive him. He looked at Xue who was sitting on the beach in the distance. His eyes showed gentleness as he said with a smile, Junior didn't want to build his foundation, but under a coincidence, he suddenly built his foundation. It was really out of Junior's expectations. However, because Junior's sister still hasn't built her foundation, Junior has always been accompanying her. She said she wanted to come to Guihisi to see the sea. This Guihisi is so far away from the state of Shi, so Junior wanted to wait until I returned to the state of Shi from Guihisi before sending the message. The Empress was disdainful at first and didn't really take it to her ears. But at this time, she suddenly asked curiously, So, you also built your foundation during this training? You accompanied your junior sister out? Saying this, the Empress looked at Xue. Junior doesn't dare to hide anything. Nyang, please investigate. I just built my foundation a few years ago. Xiaohua couldn't say the specific number of years and quickly replied, Junior still hasn't returned to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Oh, you entered the Imperial Thunder Sect. The Empress said thoughtfully, your cultivation is really fast. In just a few years, you reached the middle stage of foundation establishment. Are you hiding your cultivation because you're afraid others will know? That's right. Seeing the Empress's question, Xiaohua knew that the anger in her heart was slightly reduced. He smiled apologetically and said, when others see Junior's foundation establishment cultivation, they naturally think Junior is an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. If Junior reveals his skills, wouldn't that be a great advantage? You human cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent really have too many thoughts. The Empress snorted coldly and said, if this Empress makes a move, regardless of whether you're at foundation establishment or chi refinement, you'll all be killed. How could there be any advantage to be taken? Yes, how can Junior compare to Senior? Xiaohua smiled embarrassedly. Since you're accompanying your lover to travel the Dawn Rain continent, then this Empress's matter can't be considered too important. This Empress won't say any more. The Empress looked at Xiaohua and Xue with a trace of surprise in her eyes and sighed. Xiaohua hurriedly bowed. Thank you, Empress. No need. The Empress still waved her hand. What orders does Empress have? Xiaohua said again, although Junior's strength is weak, if Junior can help, I'll definitely do my best. The Empress nodded and said, actually, this Empress isn't a cultivator of the Dawn Rain continent. When Xiaohua heard the Empress say, cultivator of the human realm of the Dawn Rain continent, he felt that something was wrong. Now that he heard it, he somewhat understood and asked curiously, then Empress, where are you from? This Empress is also not a cultivator. The Empress shook her head and said, this Empress is from the 10,000 Demon Realm. 10,000 Demon Realm? It was obviously the first time Xiaohua heard this name. His face revealed astonishment. Is that place? The 10,000 Demon Realm is the same place as the Dawn Rain continent. The Empress smiled and said, it's just that it's full of demons, not humans. And this Empress is also not a human. Chapter 2142. Then the Empress explained, Dawn Rain continent is just a continent. It's extremely big and it's filled with human cultivators. There are also cultivators from other races. This space is considered a human realm. And in other spaces, there are also cultivators from other races. For example, Dawn Rain continent's enemy, the demon realm. That's the space of demons and beasts. There are some temporary or permanent connections between different spaces, commonly known as space cracks. If it's bigger, it's called a space passage. If it's smaller, it's called a space crack. This empress has only been in your Dawn Rain continent for a few decades. I also know that your Dawn Rain continent's Imperial Demon Valley has a space passage that opens from time to time. My 10,000 Demon Realm and Dawn Rain continent are both demon realms. There are also some space cracks. However, it's very secretive and not many people know about it. When this empress was traveling in the 10,000 Demon Realm a few decades ago, I suddenly saw a space crack appear. Only then did I realize that it actually led to Dawn Rain continent. And this empress happened to have something to do here, so I brought her into this space. A few decades ago? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. The time that the empress mentioned was similar to the time when he appeared in Shanghuaming in his memory. Could it be that he was from the 10,000 Demon Realm? Yes, that space crack seems to be temporary. When this empress came in, the crack had already begun to gradually disappear. The empress said thoughtfully, moreover, when this empress came in, it was near the Imperial Demon Valley. The surroundings seemed to have just gone through a great battle. The space was extremely unstable and there were many cracks. Isn't there another space that leads here? Xiaohua turned his eyes and asked. You can say that. The empress nodded. However, what other spaces are, whether there are any cultivators, or what race of cultivators there are all uncertain. At least this empress hasn't heard of any other space for now. This junior understands. Xiaohua was somewhat enlightened. He was afraid that he had some relationship with the 10,000 Demon Realm that the empress came from. After all, Xiaohuang was also recognized by the empress at this time. The empress hesitated slightly and said, actually, this empress came to Dawn Rain continent this time to find a person. As for him coming here as a man and a woman, this empress doesn't know. Yes, this junior understands. If senior knows how that senior came, where he went, or even if there is an image of him, that would be for the best. Xiaohua smiled apologetically. The empress shook her head. He naturally came to Dawn Rain continent through a spatial rift. As for where he went, isn't that what this empress is looking for? Furthermore, it's impossible for him to reveal his true body in front of human cultivators. Therefore, it's impossible for this palace to have an image of him in Dawn Rain continent. Xiaohua didn't give up. Senior must have some clues, right? If this consort had it, this consort would have found it long ago. Why would this consort need your help? The imperial consort said in annoyance. Of course, Xiaohua suddenly understood. If the empress had some random clues, all she needed to do was find a cultivation sect and give them some benefits. Why would she need to look for him? Of course, I also have some misgivings, the empress said. With a wave of her hand, a ray of light flashed and disappeared in an instant. Xiaohua felt that not only was he unable to hear any sound, but even everything in front of him was also a three-colored expanse. It should be the empress who set up a restriction. Sure enough, he heard the empress say again. This person has my 10,000 Demon Realms Supreme Demon Body Cultivation Technique. This empress doesn't want more people to know about it. Ah? This was the first time Xiaohua heard someone mention the words, supreme. Furthermore, it was from the empress whose cultivation was unfathomable. He couldn't help but be shocked. Although that cultivation technique is useless to the human race. The empress frowned. But the interference is great. This empress doesn't want this information to be leaked. This. Xiaohua hesitated and said embarrassedly, this kind of top-grade cultivation technique, this junior. I'm afraid it's really beyond my ability. This empress also didn't put any hope on you. The empress said disdainfully. However, if you can really help this empress find it, this empress can consider passing on the most basic, modified chance to you. Empress, didn't you say that it's useless to the human race? Xiaohua asked curiously. What's the use of passing it to this junior? This empress seems to have seen you have some kind of dharma body. Presumably, You are also a descendant of some kind of demon cultivator. Using this basic chance, it can help you cultivate a Dharma body. If you can master it, it will be more than half of your original strength. So powerful. Xiaohua was shocked. This cultivation technique is really incredible. The 10,000 Demon Realms External Incarnation Technique is the magical power of the Demon Realm's great saint. How can you know it? The Empress said proudly. This technique is comparable to Shangqing Heaven's 1 Qi into 3 pure ones. At this point, the Empress suddenly realized something. She immediately stopped talking and changed her words. In short, this cultivation technique can connect to ghosts and gods. If you can find it, this Empress will definitely not treat you unfairly. Yes, this junior understands. Xiaohua's heart was itching. He cupped his hands and said. The Empress clapped her hands and took out a dark green jade ruby-like object again. She handed it to Xiaohua and said, "Take this object. When this object is 100 or so kilometers away from that person, it will produce a reaction, and this Empress will naturally know." Yes, this junior understands. Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. He respectfully took it and carefully put it into his storage bag. This time, don't let this Empress down. The Empress warned. Yes, I definitely don't dare. Xiaohua smiled apologetically. That artifact has the image of that person in the 10,000 demon realm. If you have the time, you can take a look. The Empress said again. That person in the 10,000 demon realm is called Minghua. He is also a well-known figure. Yes. Xiaohua could only be a follower. Alright, this Empress is leaving. The Empress clapped her hands. Xiaohua's eyes shook for a moment and returned to the previous scene. There's still a few people waiting for you over there. Where is the Empress going? Xiaohua hurriedly asked. The Empress hesitated for a moment and said, This Empress has a feeling that there are some opportunities in the north of the country of Xi. I'm afraid I have to go there and take a look. Oh, Xiaohua nodded and bowed. This junior wishes the Empress success. Gidge, the Empress smiled. Why does it mean success when the horse arrives? Why not a camel beast? What about a lion? This. Xiaohua also scratched his head and said honestly, since it's like that, this junior also doesn't understand. The Empress swept her gaze and glanced at Shui. She said, this junior sister of yours is quite interesting. Forget it, let's not talk about it. If I tell you, you will be bound again in the future. Don't think too much. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this time, he already knew that the Empress already knew that his Naiwan Palace and Dantian were sealed when she first met him. However, she just didn't say anything. It seems that this time is also the same. She clearly saw that something was wrong with Shui, but she still didn't say anything. Are all experts like this? Xiaohua thought to himself. Xiaohua took Xiao Huang from Dai Er's hand and bowed. Farewell, Empress. Xiaohua, this time, don't disappoint the Empress. Dai Er's gaze was still on Xiao Huang as she said with a smile. Yes, the Xiao knows. Xiaohua thought of the opportunity that Dai Er gave him again and again. His heart warmed. He clapped his hand and took out a youth-retaining grass. He said, this is something that this Xiao obtained by chance. This is for Dai Er. Youth-retaining grass. Dai Er was overjoyed. She grabbed it and said with a smile, Empress, Dai Er also has youth-retaining grass. Dai Er won't be afraid when Dai Er transforms in the future. The Empress's eyes revealed affection. She glanced at Xiaohua and said with a smile, this Empress knows why you didn't take this Empress's matter to heart. It turns out that there are no benefits. No, definitely not. Xiaohua was shocked and hurriedly shook his head. The Empress thought for a moment. She clapped her hand and took out 2 jade slips. One was dark green and the other was pale white. She handed them to Xiaohua and said, this is my 10,000 demon realms flowing cloud movement technique. If you can practice it, you can help this Empress. This other jade slip is an introduction to the 10,000 demon realms language. After saying that, without waiting for Xiaohua to refuse, She waved her hand in Xiao Hua's hand and flew to the sky with Dai. The Junior thanks Senior. Xiao Hua held the jade slip in his hand and cupped his hands to the sky. He was quite emotional in his heart. No wonder so many cultivators wanted to climb up to high-level seniors. With just a casual move, without waiting for him to speak, the flowing cloud movement technique was given to him. Listening to the meaning, this movement technique was not ordinary. Xiao Hua didn't have time to check the jade slip, nor did he have time to check the dark green jade. He turned his head to look at Bai Min and the few fishermen who seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life. When Xiao Hua flew over, the few old fishermen had already knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Junior brother thanks Zhen Hun for his kindness. You wait, Xiao Hua waved his sleeves and said, "It wasn't I who did it. Didn't you see it after waiting? It was that fairy who saved me." Spiritual master. An old man with wrinkles on his face as if carved by a knife said with emotion, "That fairy and spiritual master both need to be thanked." However, this junior is even more grateful to spiritual master. If it wasn't for spiritual master saving us, we would have already become food for fish and shrimp. Yes, the fairy and spiritual master are both good immortals. We pray that the two immortals will live as long as the heavens, and their love is stronger than gold. The other few people smiled apologetically. Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air and said anxiously, "Old man, that fairy is I's senior. How can you say that? If the fairy knows, your lives won't be guaranteed." Several people's faces immediately turned green. They smiled apologetically and said, "This junior saw that the two immortals are both beautiful. They are really a pair, so I made a wild guess. Schutz, don't say any more." Xiao Hua hurriedly stopped them. He pointed at Shui and said, "That person is I's dual cultivation partner. Don't let her hear it." At this moment, Shui was sitting cross-legged with a solemn expression. She seemed to have comprehended something, so how could she hear it? However, the few fishermen nodded their heads in sympathy and didn't mention this matter again. However, the leading fisherman still asked for Xiao Hua's name. Xiao Hua didn't care. Since he did it, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, so what if he left his name? Xiao Hua still hadn't reached the realm of doing good deeds without leaving his name. Chapter 2143. So it's Xiao Hua, Taoist Master Xiao. The fisherman kowtowed again. "Taoist Master Xiao, we don't know how to repay your kindness to us. From now on, we'll definitely set up a longevity tablet for Taoist Master and pray that Taoist Master's fortune will last forever." Then thank you very much. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and sent the fisherman away. Only now did Xiao Hua turn to Bai Min and say, "Fellow Taoist Bai, is there anything else?" Bai Min smiled bitterly. What else could there be? Xiao Hua was definitely asking while knowing the answer. However, Bai Min wasn't a brainless person. He rolled his eyes and bowed. "I'm here to thank Taoist Master Xiao for saving my life. If it weren't for Taoist Zhao's intervention, even if I could escape this calamity, I'm afraid none of the 57 disciples of my overseas Star Bright Island, Jiue Island, Awakened Silicon Island, and Tiger Spine Island would have survived." I didn't plan to save these fellow Taoists. Xiao Hua shook his head. "Fellow Taoist Bai, your words are too heavy." "Of course not," Bai Min said anxiously. "Although Taoist Master Xiao didn't intend to save us, this is the truth. If Taoist Master Xiao didn't show up, we would have died long ago. Taoist Master Xiao can't erase this matter." "Alas, all right," Xiao Hua said helplessly. "Don't say so many useless words. I promise to save these disciples." "Thank you, Taoist Master Xiao." Bai Min was overjoyed. However, before he could finish thanking, Xiao Hua said again, "However, I can't save them for nothing." Of course. Bai Min smiled apologetically. "Senior, if you have any conditions, just say it." Xiao Hua nodded. Just as he was about to say that he would bring their storage pouches, he thought of something. These are all Qi refinement disciples. What good things can they have in their storage pouches? Don't ask for something else. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua said, "Yes, I have 3 conditions." Bai Min said somewhat uneasily, "Taoist Master Xiao, if your conditions aren't difficult, can you save the disciples of the islands first? If they're frozen in the ice for too long, it's not suitable for their swimming physique." "Fine," Xiao Hua nodded. "Zhao's conditions aren't difficult. I'll save you and your disciples first." "Thank you, Taoist Xiao." Bai Min imitated the fisherman and called him Taoist Xiao. Xiao Hua glanced at Xue Xue. Seeing that there was no movement, he flew above the ice layer. The gigantic block of ice floated on the surface of the sea. It was 1,000 feet wide and several tens of feet deep. It was sparkling and translucent, looking extremely beautiful in the dark of the night. "Go." Xiao Hua waved his hand and the fire carpet flew out. Although this thing was destroyed by Xiao Hua's spirit fire, Xiao Hua's fire controlling technique was very subtle and didn't damage the formation too much. Therefore, after obtaining Fei Xiqing's storage pouch, Xiao Hua easily repaired it with the 5 elements refining technique. The fire carpet flew into the air, and as Xiao Hua poured his magic power into it, it gradually grew bigger, turning into a layer of fire that was hundreds of feet wide. The thin flame was greenish-red in color, and its temperature was extremely high. Following Xiao Hua's incantation, the layer of fire slowly descended and gradually seeped into the layer of ice. Immediately, the unbreakable layer of ice immediately turned into ice water and mixed into the sea. What caused Bai Min to be astonished was that the fire net avoided all of the disciples without exception. Not even a single hair was burned. Although the disciples rescued by Xiao Hua weren't in any danger, their vitality was greatly damaged. They didn't have time to thank Xiao Hua, and they all used their flying talismans to land on the shore, took medicinal pills, and adjusted their breathing. And Xiao Hua had to use nearly 8 fire carpets in a row before he managed to save all the disciples of the various islands. Seeing that Bai Min was busy arranging the cultivators, Xiao Hua didn't say much and flew to Xue Xue's side, sitting close to her. What did Empress mean by Xue Xue's words? Xiao Hua secretly tried to figure out Empress's tone just now, trying to judge whether it was good or bad. Unfortunately, Empress's tone was extremely indifferent, so how could Xiao Hua judge whether it was good or bad? Forget it. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and shook his head. If it's good fortune, it's not a disaster. If it's a disaster, it can't be avoided. Empress is also extremely right. If you know too much, you will inevitably be afraid of everything. It's really boring. Immediately, Xiao Hua took out the pale white jade slip to check. After Xiao Hua's spiritual sense entered it, he looked at it for a moment, and his face revealed a strange expression. Isn't this the simplified green seal text? Xiao Hua blinked his eyes and secretly laughed in his heart. The words of the 10,000 demon realm were actually similar to the green seal text. Of course, the words were much simpler, and since this simplified green seal text could be written into the jade slip, it naturally lost the power of heaven and earth, and lost the essence of the green seal text. 10,000 demon realm. Demon, what is this thing? Xiao Hua looked at it for a moment, and knew that it was impossible to comprehend it in a short time, so he put it away. His eyes looked at the dark sky, the little stars, and the curved moon, and thought, 10,000 demon realm is actually the same space as the Dawn Rain continent. What does it look like? If I'm not wrong, I should be from the 10,000 demon realm. If so, I am also a demon? If I'm a demon, why can't Empress see it? She still thinks I'm a cultivator of the Dawn Rain continent? It's really strange. I finally know the origin of Xiao Huang. It's actually the extremely powerful Di Ting. Damn, even Dai is afraid of it. If this kid becomes Di Ting in the future, won't he? Xiao Hua suddenly thought, can he absorb the souls of spirit-severing cultivators? In that case, this young master's matter will be easily solved. AI, it's not that simple. Didn't Empress say? Xiao Huang still has a long way to go to become Di Ting. This road is so long that this young master can even split his spirit. I still need this kid to vent my anger for this young master. Xiao Hua was disheartened again. This guy only knows how to sleep and eat and sleep. Thinking of Xiao Huang's cuteness, the corner of Xiao Hua's mouth unconsciously revealed a trace of a smile, like a loving mother. Right? If Xiao Huang is Di Ting, what's that Xiao He? Why haven't this young master met Xiao He? Ming Hua, what kind of famous character is this? He actually has the supreme technique of the 10,000 demon realm. And he even came to the Dawn Rain continent. And with such a technique, he must hide in the dark to cultivate. He must have come here to cultivate. Oh my, the external incarnation technique is comparable to the 1 qi into 3 pure ones of Shangqing heaven. Right, what is this Shangqing heaven? What is 1 qi into 3 pure ones? Empress's words are really profound. Also, external incarnation, why, does it sound similar to the ghost cultivator's technique in countless ways? It seems to be somewhat similar to the sword heart energy seed technique. Xiao Hua suddenly realized, could it be, at the end of the technique, no matter what it is, it will all return to the origin? The 1 qi into 3 pure ones must also be a cultivation technique like this. Chapter 2144. That's right, that Zhang Qingxiao is from the devil sect. There must be something like this in their cultivation technique. It's just a matter of who can cultivate it to the extreme. Thinking of Zhang Qingxiao, Xiao Hua was full of doubts. He thought of Xiao Yuehong and Gong Mingwei. The night passed quickly, and at dawn, Shui woke up. Seeing Xiao Hua by her side, she smiled sweetly, clapped her hands, and immediately handed the pink jade slip to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua only glanced at it with his divine sense and knew that there was still a restriction inside, so he didn't ask any more questions and carefully put it into his space. He understood that Shui would definitely not say anything until the time was right. Husband, those fishermen have all been rescued, right? Shui's gaze swept across the many disciples resting in the distance and understood. And your husband was fortunate enough to not disappoint you. Xiao Hua said with a smile. However, why did my wife suddenly cultivate? Did you have some enlightenment? That's right. Shui smiled sweetly and said, the last knot in my heart has been untied. I feel that I can enter the foundation establishment stage at any time. Ha, great. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He actually somersaulted a few times in the air and said, this trip to QC was not in vain. He, Shui also laughed. It's a pity that I was comprehending and could not see my husband display his might. Ah, my wife is wrong. Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and pinched Shui's nose and said with a smile, the one who displayed his might yesterday was not your husband, but someone else. There was someone else who helped? Shui was surprised and looked around. Unfortunately, other than Bai Min and the others who had already stood up and were walking over, there were no other cultivators. It was very lively yesterday. Xiao Hua had a mysterious expression on his face. He then looked at Bai Min and the others and said in a low voice, however, these cultivators brought a bamboo pole for me to strike. After I'm done, I'll explain everything to you in detail. Bamboo pole? What do you mean? Shui asked curiously. At this time, Bai Min and the others had already arrived. The 4 of them bowed and said, I and the others thank fellow Taoist Xiao for saving our lives. There's no need to bow. Xiao Hua said with a smile, yesterday, fellow Taoist Bai Min has already paid his respects to quite a few people. If it wasn't for him begging me bitterly, I would have left long ago. When Bai Min heard this, his heart warmed. He was very pleased with himself. He felt that everything that happened yesterday was not in vain. That's right. We all know fellow Taoist Bai's feelings for us. He could have escaped, but he chose to stay with us instead. In the future, the connection between Awakening Silicon Island and our 3 islands will be even closer. Ko Qinglian said with deep affection. A strange expression appeared on Xiao Hua's face. Damn it, this Ko Qinglian couldn't have been interested in Bai Min for a long time, right? She actually took this opportunity to confess today? This is what I should do. Bai Min said with a smile. However, I've already agreed to 3 of fellow Taoist Zhao's conditions yesterday. Fellow Taoist Zhao, please give me your orders. I hope that the 4 of us will be able to satisfy fellow Taoist Zhao's requests. Yes, fellow Taoist Zhao, please speak. The 3 of them also smiled apologetically. This fellow is quite tactful. Xiaohua secretly gave a thumbs up to Bai Min in his heart. He said again, my 3 conditions are very simple. First, I also want to hunt some sea beasts in the heavenly sea. I hope that the island masters of the various islands in the sea will show mercy and not blame me for overstepping my boundaries. Hee, fellow Taoist Zhao must be joking. Bai Min immediately replied, not to mention fellow Taoist Zhao's kindness to us, even if fellow Taoist Zhao brought his dual cultivation partner here to hunt sea beasts, we won't interfere too much. Then that's good. Xiaohua said with a smile, my second condition is, can you let me cultivate your water escape technique? Water escape technique? Bai Min was slightly stunned. He looked at the others and was very puzzled. Ding Xuan thought for a moment and smiled apologetically. Is fellow Taoist Zhao talking about the technique that we use to enter and exit the sea? And that's right. Could it be that it's not a water escape technique? Xiaohua knew that he was wrong. I'll let fellow Taoist Zhao know that it's not a water escape technique, but a type of water dispelling technique. Ko Qinglian grinned and said, it's an ordinary technique of the various islands in the sea. In essence, it's a flying technique. As she spoke, Ko Qinglian slapped her hand and took out a jade slip from her storage pouch. She handed it to Xiaohua and said, if fellow Taoist Zhao is interested in this technique, I'll give it to you right away. So it's like that. Xiaohua was very disappointed. He received it with his hand and looked at it with his divine sense for a moment. He nodded and said, thank you, fellow Taoist Ko. Seeing Ko Qinglian rush to give the water-dispelling technique to Xiaohua, Ding Xuan smiled apologetically again and said, I wonder what fellow Taoist Zhao's third condition is? If my Tiger Spine Island has it, I'll definitely give it to you. When did these people become so respectful? They all want to curry favor with this young master? Xiaohua was slightly stunned, but he immediately understood. His strength was comparable to 5 middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators, and he also had the backing of a cultivator like the Empress whose true cultivation was unknown. Which cultivator wouldn't want to make friends with him? Cough cough, my last condition is, who knows where Sunset Island is? After Xiaohua finished speaking, he looked at the 4 people very eagerly. Sunset Island? Sure enough, the 4 people looked at each other in dismay. You look at me, I look at you. It seems that none of them have heard of this island. Fellow Taoist Zhao, I'll let you know. Among the various islands in the sea, there are Star Bright Island, Moon Island, Broken Star Island, Sunrise Island, Star Island. And there's also Scorching Sun Island. However, I've never heard of Sunset Island. Xiang Wenqing finally got the chance and hurriedly said, then, is there any island that has the celestial race? Xiaohua thought for a moment and still asked. If we're talking about the celestial race, then the various islands in the sea should all be counted. Bai Min said with a smile, as for the true celestial race, I'm afraid they're already gone. All right, if fellow Taoist Zhao wants to find Sunset Island, my Silicon Islands records are more comprehensive. Moreover, my island master also has a wide range of connections. Fellow Taoist Zhao might as well return with I. You'll definitely be able to obtain some information. Ding Xuan, Xiang Wenqing, and Ko Qinglian smiled bitterly. As expected, Bai Min was the first to say this sentence. However, they were also clear about Bai Min's righteous act yesterday, so they couldn't snatch it from him. Thus, the 3 of them looked at each other and smiled. Since fellow Taoist Bai invited fellow Taoist Zhao to the island, we won't fight over it. We'll go report to the island master and ask him to make a decision. Immediately, the 3 of them each took out a small storage pouch and said, fellow Taoist Zhao, these 3 conditions are practically unspoken. We still feel apologetic in our hearts. These sea beasts' inner cores, beast skins, and other items are the specialties of QC. Please kindly accept them. Haha. Xiao Hua was secretly happy in his heart. Truly, he got whatever he wanted. Sometimes, some words not spoken were more important than spoken. Xiao Hua pretended to decline a few times, but he accepted them. Immediately, the 4 island masters formed a team. Xiao Hua carried Xue Xue and followed everyone into the sky, heading towards QC. Behind them, in the fishing village, many fishermen indeed erected Xiao Hua's longevity memorial arch. At first, they were grateful, but later, as long as they paid their respects to Xiao Hua, after going out to sea, they would be calm and even had a bountiful harvest. However, the fishermen who didn't pay their respects were far worse. It was unknown whether it was true or if they made it up. In any case, as time passed, all the fishermen in QC began to pay their respects. Taoist Master Zhao's name actually became their guardian god. Sometimes, faith came about like this. Perhaps it was a coincidence, perhaps it was true, perhaps it was false. However, as for whether it was true or false, even the believer couldn't say for sure. And even if it was the believer, how could he say it clearly? The depths of QC were different from the seaside. Xiao Hua, who was surrounded by the crowd, felt that all he could see was waves. He couldn't see north, south, east, and west. Other than the sparkling light in his eyes, he couldn't see anything else. Moreover, the sound of waves in his ears was mixed with the whistling sea breeze and the cries of seabirds. After flying for an hour, Xiao Hua still couldn't see anything different. It was simply like looking at a mountain and running a horse to death. Good boy, this young master is a directionally challenged idiot. On Dawn Rain Continent, let alone here. Xiao Hua sighed and stole a glance at Xue Xue. At this moment, Xue Xue's eyes were also filled with confusion. Naturally, she had the same thoughts as Xiao Hua. As they were traveling, Bai Min and the others paused slightly and turned to fly towards the north. After a while, they once again flew towards the east. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was somewhat bewildered. He couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Bai, why is that? Wouldn't it be fine if we just directly flew over? Why are we taking a detour?" Bai Min smiled apologetically and said, "I'll let fellow Taoist Xiao know. Just now, the place we passed by was a dangerous place. Its range was several tens of miles. Within it, divine sense was disturbed, true qi, and true essence were also disturbed. Many times, flying techniques couldn't be used. Ordinary cultivators who didn't know about it would most likely lose their lives if they fell into it." Oh, there's such a thing. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Wasn't this similar to the forbidden and dangerous places on Dawn Rain Continent? Exactly. Ko Qinglian grinned and said, "This place is still the inner sea of my QC. It's far from the deep sea. According to my island master, not only are there many dangerous places like this, there are also many powerful sea beasts in the sea. Even if Gold Core, Nascent Soul, and other seniors were there, they could be attacked." Hearing this, Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled and asked, "This Xiao knows that as long as those demonic beasts reach the 8th stage, they can transform. Their strength is comparable to nascent soul cultivators. Since those sea beasts can attack nascent soul cultivators, and it said that even spirit-severing stage seniors are disturbed, these sea beasts should be around the 8th stage. Why didn't they transform?" The reason why Xiao Hua asked this was because he had just seen Yang and die, so he was extremely puzzled. "I know about this." Ding Xuan said with a smile, "My island master once said that because the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the QC becomes thinner, although those powerful sea beasts can defeat nascent soul cultivators, because the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is innately thin, it's not enough for them to transform. If they can't do it in the deep sea, then they'll come to the near sea." Xue Xue said with a smile, "The spiritual energy of heaven and earth here is still abundant. If the 8th stage sea beasts come to the near sea, those spirit-severing stage seniors, I'm afraid they'll swarm over." Ding Xuan said with a smile. Chapter 2145. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua slapped his forehead, suddenly enlightened. Yes, Although the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the distant sea was insufficient, it was still possible to survive. In the coastal sea, it was true that it could transform, but before it could transform, its inner core would be taken away by cultivators. How could it still cultivate? And for powerful human cultivators, if they wanted to hunt 7th or 8th stage sea beasts, they had to take the risk of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth being insufficient. They had to take the risk of being killed by sea beasts. In this way, each of them formed a kind of restraint. This was also the reason why there were so few demon cores in Xiaoyu continent. However, why is the spiritual energy of heaven and earth so thin in the depths of Guihe Sea? An even more terrible question appeared in the mind of Xiao Hua, who liked to think. Fellow Taoist Xiao, we have to take our leave. Just as he was thinking, Ding Xuwen, Ko Qinglian, and Xiang Wenqing stopped in midair with their disciples. They cupped their hands and said, "Our 3 islands are on the east side of Awakening Silicon Island. We have to part here. Once again, thank you for saving us, fellow Taoist Xiao. If you have free time, please come to our 3 islands. Island Master will definitely thank you." The 3 of them said, "Okay, I have visited Awakening Silicon Island. If I have the chance, I will also go to the 3 islands to take a look. In addition, if the 3 of you have news about Sunset Island, please also inform me." Xiao Hua said a few polite words and parted ways with the 3 of them. After the 3 of them left with their disciples, Xiao Hua asked again in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Bai, I am not afraid of you laughing at me. This Guihe Sea is so big. If you only rely on the sun for directions, I am afraid it is not reliable. How do you distinguish the direction? How do you identify the route?" Hee. Bai Min clapped his hand and took out a spoon-like light green magic tool. He handed it over and said with a smile, "This is the magic tool used by our overseas islands, Compass Point. You only need to carve the map of the sea near you into it, and that magic tool will be able to guide the direction." "Ah, I see." Xiao Hua laughed. "Looks like I am not too bad at directions. Everyone is a sea idiot when they are on the sea. By the way, fellow Taoist Bai, can you give me a copy of the map of the Sinan Sea and the QC? Xiao Hua asked without any trace of politeness. Bai Min looked a little embarrassed. He smiled apologetically and said, "This kind of artifact and sea chart are the secrets of each island. I can't take it. However, if fellow Taoist Xiao wants it, I'll mention it to the island master when I see him later. With fellow Taoist Zhao's kindness to my Silicon Island, it shouldn't be a problem." "All right," Xiao Hua nodded. He didn't mind. If the Awakening Silicon Island wasn't given to him, he could just casually find one on the Jianghu Sea. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, a thumb-sized black shadow appeared on the horizon. Bai Min pointed at it and said with a smile, "This is my Awakening Silicon Island." Xiao Hua gazed into the distance. That island was truly too far away, and he couldn't see it with his eyes. Xiao Hua was also too lazy to release his Buddhist consciousness. He only nodded slightly and followed Bai Min as they flew straight to Awaken Silicon Island. Only when they flew closer did Xiao Hua get a clear look. He was somewhat flabbergasted again. This island was really too big. Its circumference was actually 100 li. Moreover, there were hundreds of small islands of various sizes clustered around it. These hundreds of small islands seemed to form a large-scale formation, protecting this Awakening Silicon Island from all sides. Bai Min even started to lead Xiao Hua around the island from afar. They flew to the east and flew to the west. Obviously, they were avoiding the restrictions within. "This defense is too tight," Xiao Hua said with a slight smile. "We can't not defend." Bai Min smiled bitterly. The Jianghu Sea is not like the Xiaoyu continent. Not only do we have violent astronomical phenomena, such as hurricanes, fierce rain, and even inexplicable thunder. Even the tsunamis that we frequently encounter are hard to withstand with human strength. Not to mention that occasionally, some tyrannical sea beasts come here. It's really hard for you. Xiao Hua understood the difficulty of survival in the Jianghu Sea. Bai Min sent out the communication talisman. That light blue flame rushed into the water and disappeared in an instant. I hope my island master can have the information that fellow Taoist Xiao wants to know. Bai Min carefully smiled apologetically. I hope so. Although Xiao Hua said so, he was still nervous in his heart. Haoming City didn't know, Bai Min and the others didn't know, but this Sunset Island might not be easy to find. Sure enough, several days later, Xiao Hua's face carried a trace of disappointment. He left the awakening Silicon Island accompanied by an early gold core cultivator. Husband, it looks like there's trouble, Xue Xue said considerately. Both Island Master Zhang of Awakened Silicon Island and their self-proclaimed knowledgeable elder have said that they've never heard of it. I'm afraid it won't be easy to find Sunset Island. Yes, that Zhang Ye said it clearly. The tides rise and fall of the Qianhe Sea, and the islands in it are also uncertain. That Sunset Island is probably one of them, and now it has already sunk into the sea. Where can we find it? However, Island Master Zhang also said that many islands changed their names because their island masters died or because their cultivators declined. Maybe Sunset Island still exists. It's all possible. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Otherwise, Zhang Yi wouldn't have told us the locations of the 4 largest islands in the Qianhe Sea: Scorching Sun Island, Ice Blade Island, Gale Island, and Yensen Island. Where should we find them? Then where should we go now? Xue Xue asked again. From Island Master Zhang's tone, the locations of these 4 islands are very far from the coastal waters. Moreover, they are very far from each other. This Zhang Yi is quite righteous. Not only did he give me the compass, but he also gave me the sea map. Xiao Hua clapped his hand, and a light cyan compass appeared in his hand. He probed it with his divine sense. After looking at it for a long time, he clapped his hand again and took out the sea map he obtained from Haoming City. He pointed his hand, and the sea map flickered with a blue brilliance and fell into the compass. Then, a layer of brilliance overflowed from one end of the compass to the other end. Great. Xiao Hua checked again and said with a smile, 60% of the 2 sea maps match, and the other 40% complement each other. The sea map of the Qianhe Sea is considered complete. At this moment, Xiao Hua's heart suddenly jumped. He raised his eyes and looked in the direction of the Dawn Rain continent. What's wrong? Husband? Xue Xue always knew about Xiao Hua's whims and asked with concern. Xiao Hua frowned for a long time and shook his head slightly. He said puzzledly, there seems to be some warning signs. However, I don't have any way to check the warning signs. Perhaps someone on the Dawn Rain continent wants to plot against me again? Who exactly is it? With husband's cultivation, I'm afraid only a Jindan cultivator can cause a warning sign. Xue Xue also pondered and asked. Husband, you must be careful. When we return from the Qianhe Sea, we must be even more careful. We must take the transportation array all the way. And, for safety's sake, that's exactly what I have to do. If Xiao Hua was himself, it would be fine. However, he couldn't ignore Xue Xue's safety. Zhong Tianyao previous threat wasn't without reason. In this world, there were many high-level cultivators who didn't care about their status. Chapter 2146. Let's go. That Scorching Sun Island is quite close to here. Let's go there before. Xiao Hua stretched out his hand, held Xue Xue's soft hand, and said with a smile, we don't need to hurry. If you can build your foundation on this boundless sea, how wonderful would that be? Exactly, that's what I was thinking. Xue Xue also covered her mouth and said with a smile, that Scorching Sun Island might be another name for Sunset Island. Let's go slowly and enjoy the scenery of the sea. Then Xiao Hua took Xue Xue, and the 2 of them really flew leisurely. The sea map in the compass was very complete. The sea map in Haoming City recorded some islands and the situation on the islands, while the sea map in Awakening Silicon Island mostly recorded the routes between the islands, the dangerous places in the sea, and the distribution of sea beasts. Xiao Hua took the compass and followed Xue Xue all the way. They avoided all the dangerous places, and Xiao Hua didn't let go of any place with sea beasts. He didn't know what these sea beasts were for, so he hunted some and put them in the space. If it weren't for the fact that his space didn't have enough space to hold seawater, With Xiaohua's greed, he might have taken these living sea beasts into the space. Moreover, for Shue's foundation building, Xiaohua didn't walk much every day. He walked at sunrise and stopped at sunset. According to the instructions of the compass, he found an uninhabited island or reef, and laid down a rapid array to rest or cultivate. This trip took more than 10 days, and they hadn't even reached half of the journey from awakening Silicon Island to scorching Sun Island. On this day, Xiaohua and Shui landed on a slightly bigger island. The sky was already dark, and the sky was still clear before. At this time, the sea breeze gradually rose, and dark clouds began to condense in the sky. Beside the dark clouds, there was a dark red color. Good heavens! Xiaohua looked at the sky. An unparalleled might of heaven and earth was faintly brewing. He couldn't help but be speechless. It's often said that man can conquer the heavens, and cultivators also have the responsibility to go against the heavens. But this might of heaven, I don't know what kind of cultivation base a cultivator has to contend against it. Young master's cultivation is still shallow. Let's go with the flow for now. Xiaohua pursed his lips and took out the flowing cloud movement technique. He had already finished reading the explanation of the 10,000 demon realm. After all, he had some understanding of the green seal text. These simplified green seal text were not particularly difficult for him. In fact, he had already mastered the so-called water-dispelling incantation during the few days he was on awakened Silicon Island. What kind of movement technique is this? Isn't this wind evasion? Xiaohua simply read through the movement technique's training method in the jade slip and immediately understood. Presently, he'd already cultivated the wood movement, earth movement, and fire movement, and he was even cultivating the lightning movement amongst lightning cultivators. So there was probably no cultivator on Dawn Rain continent that was more proficient in movement techniques than him. Xiaohua only looked at it once and immediately understood that this so-called flowing cloud movement technique was the wind evasion elementary movement technique that he had never heard of before. It was a technique that borrowed the power of the wind to display a movement technique that was similar to the flowing cloud movement technique. Good boy, young master still hasn't thought of finding some water movement technique or metal movement technique to complete the 5 elements movement technique. Unexpectedly, there's this wind evasion that I've never thought of before. 10,000 demon realms wind evasion. This empress, what kind of true body does she have? Xiaohua was shocked and overjoyed. He was amazed at the wonders of this world's cultivation techniques. After a moment, Xiaohua once again calmed down. He immersed his spirit into the jade slip and carefully comprehended it. After an unknown amount of time, a kacha, sound of thunder woke Xiaohua up from his meditation. When Xiaohua opened his eyes, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. At this time, above the entire Guihisi, layers of dark clouds covered half of the sky. It was actually as boundless as the Guihisi. And the rolling dark clouds kept rolling, as if there were endless ghosts in the clouds. The rolling dark clouds took on all kinds of shapes. There were mountains, rivers, spirit herbs, birds. Within these rolling dark clouds, there was a faint dark red light that flickered. It flickered in and out of existence, and a boundless majesty overflowed from within the dark clouds. Grandma, it's really magnificent. Xiaohua was speechless. He could only sigh in his heart. It wasn't that he hadn't seen a thunderstorm before, but he had never seen such a magnificent thunderstorm. These oppressive dark clouds were like a pressure on one's heart. Following the first thunder just now, like a firecracker, the sound of thunder continued to resound. Immediately after, a pitter-patter sound of raindrops the size of beans came one after another, hitting the surface of the Guihisi. One after another, fist-sized depressions appeared on the surface of the sea. At the same time, the wind became stronger and stronger. The waves gradually formed. At first, it was small waves, then it became huge waves. However, the rumbling sound of the waves was far from being able to suppress the flashing thunder in the sky. Xiaohua was originally sitting within the rabbit formation. Most of the rainwater was blocked by the formation. A layer of faintly discernible faint golden brilliance flashed around Xiao Hua and Xue Xue. However, when the many lightning bolts above his head were like little golden snakes swimming around, Xiao Hua suddenly had a familiar feeling. I seem to... A scene suddenly appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. It was this kind of night filled with thunder, and a lonely figure was sitting cross-legged on the same island as tonight. In the pouring rain, strands of lightning struck that figure. Could it be me? Am actually not afraid of heavenly lightning? Xiao Hua's heart surged with pride. If I am struck by heavenly lightning again, would I be able to remember something? But if it doesn't work, this heavenly lightning is not a joke. This young master's physical body, cultivation, and so on, will all be damaged. This hesitant thought was merely a flash. Xiao Hua stood up. If I can recall my memories, even if my cultivation is damaged, so what? Moreover, didn't this young master get struck by lightning before? Seeing Xiao Hua stand up, Xue Xue, who was already frightened by the lightning, was stunned and hurriedly asked, "Husband, what are you going to do?" Xiao Hua hesitated. He didn't know how to explain it to Xue Xue. After thinking for a while, he smiled and said, "This husband has some things that I have to do. Now I should do it." You have to do it? Xue Xue frowned slightly. Could it be more important than your life? Yes. Xiao Hua nodded and replied. Living muddle-headedly is not as good as dying clearly. Xiao Hua's words were said to himself. However, the speaker had intentions and the listener had intentions. These words seemed to have pierced Xue Xue's heart. Xue Xue's face immediately flushed red. Her eyes flickered slightly. She nodded firmly and said loudly, "Well said, husband. Living muddle-headedly is not as good as dying clearly. This concubine will accompany you." Ah? You, what are you going to do? Xiao Hua was shocked. He pulled Xue Xue and said, "This husband still has some confidence that he won't be struck by lightning. Can you do it?" He husband. Xue Xue held Xiao Hua's hand and said with a smile, "Actually, this concubine could have taken the Ling Lei pill long ago. With husband's secret cultivation method and the Tian mending pill, this concubine should have a 50% chance of reaching foundation establishment. However, this concubine didn't dare to reach foundation establishment because in my heart, I couldn't bear to part with husband. There was a trace of apprehension in my heart. Husband, I'm afraid you don't know why this concubine came to Guihe Sea. This concubine's parents met each other when they were traveling on Guihe Sea. And this concubine also knows that they came to Guihe Sea together to reach foundation establishment and never returned. This kind of gloominess forced this concubine to not dare to rashly take that step. And now, since husband wants to take the risk, how can this concubine not accompany you? So that's how it is." Xiao Hua immediately understood why Xue Xue, who had already cultivated the Ling Lei pill, Tian mending pill, and even the dragon transformation art, still hadn't reached foundation establishment. Obviously, her mental state wasn't perfect. Now that she heard his words, her mental state was perfect. If she didn't reach foundation establishment now, her mental state would inevitably be lacking. This was the best time for Xue Xue to reach foundation establishment. Since that's the case, wife, please. Xiao Hua laughed and pulled Xue Xue out of the formation. The huge sea breeze mixed with bean-sized raindrops hit the two of them. Xue Xue's body faintly glowed. Obviously, it was a defensive yellow talisman. However, there was no movement on Xiao Hua's body. Obviously, this force wasn't enough to trigger a reaction from his protective light. Wife, please. Since it was Xue Xue who reached foundation establishment, Xiao Hua naturally couldn't attract the lightning first. He smiled and said, "Very well, I'll give you a chance to protect this concubine." Xue Xue laughed and clapped her hands, taking out the Ling Lei pill refined by Xiao Hua. "Take out the Tian mending pill as well, just in case." Xiao Hua reminded. "Crow's beak." Xue Xue scolded jokingly, "The Tian mending pill is in the storage bag. This concubine can take it out with a raise of her hand. There's no need to be so cautious." Seeing that Shui didn't have any burden in her heart, Xiaohua was secretly happy. Shui sat cross-legged and looked deeply at Xiaohua. She raised her hand and put the Ling Lei pill into her mouth. Once the Ling Lei pill entered her mouth, it immediately turned into a surging current that rushed into Shui's meridians. Although Shui was already prepared, she was still shocked by the medicinal power of the Ling Lei pill. Of course, Shui was only startled for a moment. Immediately after, the mental cultivation method of the Thunder Control Sect's Sun Lei Palace began to circulate and forcefully guided the medicinal power to flow through her meridians. After the medicinal power had circulated 9 cycles in her meridians, Shui's true qi had increased by 20%. Luckily, Shui's meridians had been tempered by the dragon transformation art and had already become thicker by 30%. This amount of true qi was still within the limits of her meridians. Hong! A loud sound rang out and Shui's mind exploded. The medicinal power of the Ling Lei pill had already seeped out of her meridians and directly entered Shui's blood vessels. Shui's blood vessels had already come into contact with the medicinal power of the Ling Lei pill. Immediately, like an ignited explosive, it began to explode bit by bit and pushed forward bit by bit, gradually approaching her heart. This is bad. Shui was alarmed. She could use the dragon transformation art to control the true qi in her meridians, but how could she control her blood vessels? This was something she had never thought of before. Chapter 2147. Heaven Mend Pill. Shui instantly thought of Xiaohua's warning. Without hesitation, she slapped her hand and the Heaven Mend pill entered her mouth. Why did you take the Heaven Mend pill so early? Xiaohua had been paying attention to Shui, but he didn't dare to use his divine sense. Seeing Shui take the Heaven Mend pill from the start, he couldn't help but be shocked. As soon as the Heaven Mend pill entered her mouth, a flood immediately rushed into her meridians. It followed the path of the thunder pill and seeped into her blood vessels. At this time, the unstoppable explosion had already spread throughout Shui's blood vessels and rushed straight to her heart. Rumble! When the Heaven Mend pill's medicinal power reached her heart, Shui's heart suddenly swelled like a bubble. Shui's face was snow-white. She finally understood why the Shui family with the Thunder Beast bloodline had so few foundation establishment cultivators. The Thunder Beast's true blood was truly tyrannical. It was absolutely not something a human cultivator's body could withstand. Fortunately, just as Shui's heart was about to burst, the Heaven Mend pill's medicinal power arrived. It quickly repaired the damaged areas and continuously strengthened the heart's toughness. Roar! Just as Shui's blood vessels were stimulated by the thunder pill's medicinal power, she raised her hands and let out a roar similar to that of a thunder beast. As Shui waved her arms, a faint shadow of a thunder beast flew out from Shui's body. At the same time, Shui's snow-white face unexpectedly became a bit sinister. She actually showed signs of turning into a thunder beast. No way! Shui won't turn into a female thunder beast, right? Xiaohua was stunned as he watched from the side. His mind raced. Not only did the terrifying figure and face of a female thunder beast appear in his mind, he even thought that if Shui really turned into a female thunder beast, should he fall in love with someone else? It was also at this time that the true qi in Shui's meridians suddenly changed. Threads of flickering lightning formed in the true qi. Her true qi suddenly increased and expanded by more than 30%. If it was an ordinary cultivator, their meridians would have been filled with true qi when they reached foundation establishment. Now that their meridians suddenly increased by 30%, they would have already burst. Even Shui, who thought that her meridians were already full after taking the Ling Lei pill and Heavenly Mending pill, the sudden appearance of true qi caused her meridians to swell. Fortunately, Shui had already practiced the dragon transformation art for a long time, and her meridians were already very tough. She only reached her limit after her qi increased by 30%. However, if he added even half a point more, he was afraid that he would have to examine Xiaohua's alchemy technique again. Kacha! A faint sound came from Xue Xue's meridians. It was the sound of a trace of true essence condensing. In Xue Xue's heart, this voice was like the sound of nature. Immediately after, a series of popping sounds, similar to the popping sounds in his blood vessels, resounded throughout his meridians. The true qi in Xue Xue's meridians showed a series of reactions, and a lot of true essence began to condense. Now is the time. Xue Xue didn't know how many times she had already imagined this in her heart. At this time, seeing that the time was ripe, she slapped her hand, took out the foundation establishment pill from her storage pouch, and put it into her mouth. Swish! Xue Xue also released her divine sense at this time, wanting to extend it in the direction of the Kuei He Hai. First, it was several tens of zhang, then it was close to Li, and finally it was several li away. Not only that, but the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within 10 li had already converged. In the air within these several li, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth began to condense, and bit by bit, visible to the naked eye, crystals gradually formed. Although Xue Xue's foundation establishment aura couldn't compare to Xiaohua's, it was still much more vast than an ordinary cultivator's foundation establishment aura. Kacha! At this time, tiny streaks of lightning began to flicker around Xue Xue's divine sense. Clearly, they were attracted by Xue Xue's foundation establishment aura. Not good. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. He knew that this lightning would strike Xue Xue, and even Xue Xue's body. He really wanted to release his divine sense to help Xue Xue resist, but at this time, it was also the crucial moment for Xue Xue's foundation establishment. He was afraid that if he released his divine sense, it would disturb Xue Xue's foundation establishment. How about, I go somewhere else? Xiaohua immediately thought of the taboo that two cultivators couldn't enter foundation establishment at the same time. At this time, the thunder beast behind Xue Xue roared and gradually rose above Xue Xue's head, reaching a height of more than 10 zhang. Kacha! Although the lightning struck Xue Xue's divine sense, causing her Naiwen palace to be unable to escape the pain, the majority of the lightning was withstood by the thunder beast's shadow. The thunder beast was also in pain after being struck by the lightning. It roared and hammered its own chest. The thunder beast's body actually grew slightly bigger after being struck by the lightning. Xue Xue's Dharma body isn't afraid of ordinary lightning. Xiaohua suddenly realized. His figure flew several tens of zhang before stopping in midair. His eyes were bright as he stared at Xue. Lightning continuously struck the thunder beast's shadow. Xue's face showed an extremely painful expression. Although the thunder beast's shadow had now risen to a height of 10 zhang, there was still some true qi in her meridians that hadn't been converted into true essence. More and more lightning was attracted by Xue and continuously struck the thunder beast's shadow. The thunder beast's shadow began to show signs of collapsing. Xiaohua was very anxious. His figure flew again, but before he could fly several tens of zhang, he saw the thunder beast's shadow wave its hand again. As if it was an instinct, magic power similar to a spell appeared on its hand. Looking at the thunder beast's shadow again, two balls of brilliance suddenly flashed. It was actually the vague appearance of the male and female thunder beasts when Xiaohua refined the thunder pill. Kacha! Following the thunder beast's wave of its arm, a portion of the lightning that was originally attacking it was actually driven by it and turned to attack other lightning. The art of controlling lightning. Xiaohua, who had been staring at the scene, was pleasantly surprised. He understood that this was the thunder beast's innate ability. Just how vast was this scene? Hundreds of zhang high in the sky, the thunder beast's shadow with green and red brilliance was flapping its wings. Its hands were constantly forming spells, and dozens or even hundreds of golden lightning were driven by it. They separately struck the sky, contending with the lightning falling from the sky. This thunder beast's hand, I'm afraid it's the art of controlling lightning. Xiaohua understood that the thunder beast's shadow used it again and again, and he had long memorized the art of controlling lightning in his heart. However, when he tried to use it, his magic power was clearly surging, but the lightning didn't listen to his command at all. Why is this? Xiaohua's gaze swept quickly, trying to find the reason. In the end, Xiaohua's gaze fell on the brilliance of the male and female thunder beasts in the thunder beast shadow. Because every time the thunder beast shadow formed a spell, the two balls of brilliance would flicker once. I'm afraid it's related to the two balls of light. However, just as Xiaohua was about to take a closer look, a hurricane began to appear in the night sky. A suction force appeared above Shue's head, and all the heaven and earth spiritual qi within several li was sucked in by Xiaohua like a whale. Chapter 2148. As the heaven and earth spiritual qi shrank, Shue's divine sense also converged. After the thunder beast's shadow waved a few lightning bolts, it simultaneously shrank back into Shue's body. Fortunately, after the thunder beast's shadow disappeared, Shue's somewhat deformed face regained its original beauty and whiteness. Xiaohua finally let out a sigh of relief. He nipped the thought of shifting his love in the bud. Shue's divine sense converged completely. Although the thunderstorm was still there, the lightning bolts no longer struck here. Xiaohua's divine sense swept over Shui. He knew that she was driving her true essence, using a new technique to open up new meridians and stabilize her early foundation establishment cultivation. This process would probably last for several days. Therefore, with a joyful laugh, his entire body flashed and flew up into the sky. His divine sense rushed to the place where the lightning was produced. The thunder and lightning seemed to have been enraged by Xiaohua. It was like the sound of a giant running, and also like a rushing river, unceasingly striking toward Xiaohua. Let the lightning come more fiercely. Xiaohua raised his arms and shouted, but his arrogant voice was drowned out by the sound of thunder. Gotcha! The first lightning bolt finally hit Xiaohua's body. Ouch! A burst of numbness came from his body, and within the numbness, there was a tearing pain. Xiaohua was in so much pain that he rolled in the air. Gotcha! The second and third lightning bolts came one after another. The power and energy within the lightning bolts were increasingly great. Xiaohua felt like he was being torn into several pieces. Damn it, something's wrong. Why is this feeling different from what I expected? Xiaohua immediately felt that something was wrong. This pain didn't seem to be as comfortable as he remembered, and it didn't evoke any of his previous memories. Better not. Xiaohua frowned. If I can't recall my memories, I'll lose my life for nothing. Seeing the fourth lightning bolt coming even more fiercely, Xiaohua shook his arm without hesitation. The phoenix Dharma body flew out, and the lightning bolt hit the Dharma body. Xiaohua and the phoenix Dharma body felt the same. The intense pain still came from the Dharma body, but Xiaohua understood that this pain was useful for refining the Dharma body. Moreover, the Dharma body that had been baptized by the thunder tribulation should be able to withstand the lightning of this ordinary thunderstorm. Unfortunately, Xiaohua didn't have the method to refine the phoenix Dharma body. The thunder had a primitive function within it. It couldn't be used by Xiaohua. Yes, Xiaohua was a bit depressed. If I get the Dharma body incarnation method, I should be able to use the lightning thunder. Xiaohua was a bit depressed. Xiaohua endured the pain, sat down cross-legged, and put his palms together. He used the exquisite Heart Sutra of the Buddhist sect. The 2 pieces of gold leaf from the Zhong family made up for the Heart Sutra. Now, there were only 9 empty slots in Xiaohua's exquisite Heart Sutra. However, these 9 slots were all at the top of the exquisite Heart Sutra. Except for the last 2 floors that were completely empty, only the last slot on the 3rd floor was empty. Seeing that Xiaohua wasn't willing to give up this precious cultivation opportunity, he released the Buddha Sarira. Once the Buddha Sarira flew out, the golden Buddha's light immediately lit up the entire night sky. Although this Buddha's light was very faint, it was extremely tenacious. It was like a small golden sword piercing through the night sky. The dazzling lightning in the entire night sky must be somewhat dim under this. Obviously, this lightning was not willing to succumb to the Buddha's light, or perhaps, the Buddha Sarira was the center of Xiaohua's divine sense. All of the lightning recklessly rushed towards the Buddha, whose eyes were already clear and whose eyes were indescribably compassionate. Kachacha, indescribable pain. This pain was far from being comparable to pain. It was similar to Xiao Hua's experience of Huang Yi's 10,000 years of loneliness and hatred. This pain tormented Xiao Hua's heart and tempered his will. At the same time, it also pushed Xiao Hua's exquisite heart sutra to slowly advance. Every time the lightning struck the Buddha Sarira, Xiao Hua's state of mind would have a trace of carving, and a drop of golden liquid would be formed on the Buddha Sarira. This liquid would either be smeared on the Buddha Sarira to fill the gap on the Buddha's body, or it would seep into the Buddha's body to condense the golden body of the Buddha Sarira. When Xiao Hua's heart sutra couldn't catch up with the speed of the golden body, it slowly seeped into the golden lotus platform below the Buddha Sarira. As a result, that 2-chi-long Buddha Sarira gradually grew, and the golden lotus platform below the Buddha Sarira also gradually condensed into a third lotus. Xiao Hua, who was in the sky, was no longer sitting cross-legged. He was in the same posture as the Buddha Sarira, with one hand pointing to the sky and the other pointing to the ground. Moreover, his slender eyes were slightly opened. Admittedly, his eyes didn't have the kind of majesty that looked disdainfully at the heaven and earth, but the compassionate contained in his eyes was extremely similar to the Buddha Sarira's eyes. Xiao Hua's state of mind, Xiao Hua's compassionate heart, was precisely the same as the compassionate heart of Buddhism. On the path of merit cultivation, this Buddha Sarira was being tempered by the lightning. Xiao Hua's Buddhist Heart Sutra was also advancing at a rapid pace. Unfortunately, although the thunderstorm above the Jianghu Sea was several times more intense than the Xiaoyu continent, after 9 days, it also gradually stopped. That scorching sun revealed its head behind the dark clouds. The golden sunlight pierced through the dark clouds and shone on the waves of the Jianghu Sea. That wave was also like the thunderstorm, gradually calming down. Folds of broken gold covered the entire Jianghu Sea. Great! Xiao Hua's eyes were wide open, and the compassionate in his eyes was slightly restrained. His gaze passed through thousands of miles of blue waves, and he whispered, "Amitabha, is there right and wrong in the world? How can the word compassionate fill it?" Withdraw. Xiao Hua kept the Buddha Sarira and the phoenix celestial body back into his body. His divine sense swept over, but he saw that Xue was sitting cross-legged on the cliff outside the rabbit array. There was no surprise in her eyes, and there was a faint brilliance flowing around her body. In his senses, it was the cultivation of the early stage of foundation establishment. Where did I get this feeling from? Xiao Hua's mind turned again. When I was cultivating in the 10,000 demon realm. I attracted lightning? And I'm afraid so. Since the phoenix celestial body can cultivate in lightning, I naturally have this memory when I was cultivating in the 10,000 demon realm. Forget it. When this Xiao's cultivation is deeper, I'll flatter the Empress and see if I can follow her back to the 10,000 demon realm through the space crack. Maybe I can find my memory and find my birth and family. Then, Xiao Hua flew to the top of the cliff, some distance away from Xue, to protect her. Just like that, Xue opened her eyes after a dozen or so days. In her bright eyes, there was not the joy and pride of other cultivators who just entered foundation establishment, but more, there was a flash of sadness. Xiao Hua, who was guarding beside Xue, immediately sensed it and said in surprise, "Congratulations on advancing to foundation establishment. After foundation establishment, your lightning beast bloodline should be stable. Not only did your cultivation advance by leaps and bounds, but your strength now also surpasses those of the same level." "Oh, right, has your realm stabilized?" A smile appeared on Xue's face, and she covered her mouth and said, "I just entered foundation establishment, how can I dare to boast? Now that my realm is stable, husband doesn't have to worry." "Ha!" Xiao Hua laughed loudly, flew in front of Xue, and lightly kissed Xue's temples, saying, "Wife is indeed a genius. You really have great premonition. Before leaving the Imperial Thunder Sect, you said foundation establishment at Guihisi. You've only been at Guihisi for a few days, and sure enough, you said foundation establishment. Your husband really admires you." Hearing this, Shue's previously hidden sadness suddenly reappeared. She immediately lowered her eyes, looked at the distant blue waves, and said with a forced smile, "How would I know what premonition is? It's just that my parents went missing at Guihisi, so I wanted to come to Guihisi to take a look." Xiaohua did not notice Shue's uneasiness. He reached out and held Shue's slender waist, opened his mouth and licked Shue's earlobe, whispering, "Wife, now, you're a foundation establishment cultivator. You and I dual cultivate, it won't affect your cultivation, right?" Hearing this, Shue's face flushed red, and her body gradually became hot and dry because of Xiaohua's flirting. The original trace of gloom in her heart had already flown out of the sky. "Wife, your husband has a dual cultivation technique here. It's far superior to that Qiu Mingwei's furnace technique." Xiaohua said with a lewd smile, "Maybe you can even step into the middle stage of foundation establishment." Bah! Shui lightly spat, turned her head, and instead bit Xiaohua's ear, saying, "Don't mention that dirty man and woman to me." "Io," Xiaohua begged for mercy in a low voice. "Your husband knows his wrongs. Your husband knows his wrongs. My wife and I are a match made in heaven. How can they compare to us?" Sigh. Shue's heart seemed to emit a sorrowful sob, as if she was somewhat unwilling, however, Shue's face was still red like fire, and the teeth that bit Xiaohua's ear also loosened, replaced by her tongue. Her slightly nervous arms also stiffened, and she somewhat forcefully hugged Xiaohua. "Great!" Xiaohua secretly rejoiced, unable to suppress the impulse in his heart. His figure flashed, and he was about to fly down the cliff. Unfortunately, at this incomparably crucial moment, a weak divine sense swept over from afar, had already swept past Xiaohua and Shui, and immediately locked onto the two of them. "Ah?" Xiaohua and Shui were shocked, and Shue's reaction was even more intense. She pushed Xiaohua away, and urged her magic power to stand in midair. She hurriedly tidied up her clothes, and her face became even redder, and looked at Xiaohua with eyes full of resentment. "Grandma, who is this? It must be on purpose." Xiaohua's heart was immediately extinguished as if it had met with ice water. He jumped up in the air, shouting in exasperation, and instantly released his divine sense. If the distance was close enough, Xiaohua definitely would not hesitate to release the soul stab technique, and would definitely ruthlessly teach this untactful cultivator a lesson. However, after Xiaohua released his divine sense for a moment, a trace of strangeness appeared on his face, and he thoughtfully looked at the place where his divine sense swept past. After a moment, Shui also returned to normal, rolled her eyes at Xiaohua, and released her divine sense, also looking in that direction. When Shui understood, an eager expression appeared on her face, and she said with a smile, "Husband, usually when I see you, you are happy to help others. Why are you so lazy today?" Chapter 2149. The greatest pleasure in the world has been disturbed for no reason. Who would be interested in caring about others? Xiaohua said angrily, "Didn't you see that she's already coming this way? Looking at her, she has enough strength to fly here." "Hee, since that's the case, husband will help me to prepare. I'll go and try my skills?" Shui said, and without waiting for Xiaohua to answer, she flew toward the depths of the Guihasi. "Wife." Xiaohua was a little anxious. That sea beast has strength close to the middle stage of foundation establishment, and that female cultivator is also at the early stage of foundation establishment. She can't fight it and is flying toward us. What's the use of you going? You just entered foundation establishment. I just entered foundation establishment, but isn't there a fellow cultivator at the early stage of foundation establishment there? Shui said indifferently, "Moreover, don't I have a virtuous wife nearby? What's there to be afraid of?" "A virtuous wife?" Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He waved his hand and said, "Go, just go. Your husband will be your virtuous wife, and I guarantee nothing will happen." I knew my husband would agree. Shue Shue said, and she sped up to fly into the distance. At the same time, beauty like a butterfly appeared in the air, and the colorful butterfly-like brilliance protected Shue Shue's body. Seeing Shue Shue take out her magic weapon, Xiaohua's heart calmed down. He clapped his hand and held the soaring dragon shears in his hand. Although there was no difference between holding it in the air and holding it in his hand, Xiaohua still felt at ease holding it in his hand. The two had just flown a few miles when they heard a rumbling explosion in front of them. They saw a short, petite female cultivator flying toward Xiaohua and Shue Shue while constantly waving hand signs behind her. A string of water balls fell into the water of the Kueha Sea. The water balls exploded, and the sound of the explosion splashed the sea water everywhere. In the midst of the splashing sea water, a pitch-black sea beast several meters in size was exposed. Several soft tentacles stretched out from the two sides of the sea beast's back, and then it moved the sea water, chasing after the female cultivator as if it was flying. At the same time, several small, ink-ball-like particles also smashed toward the female cultivator. Whenever the particles exploded, a putrid stench and pitch-black smoke mixed in the sea water rushed toward the female cultivator. The smoke actually didn't dissipate in the sea wind. The female cultivator was obviously afraid of the smoke. She used several water balls to blast the smoke away, and immediately fled far away. However, the female cultivator's flying speed wasn't fast. In fact, it was even slower than the flying speed of an ordinary cultivator. Thus, no matter how fast she flew, the sea beast could easily catch up to her. "Fellow cultivators, help me." When the female cultivator saw Xiaohua and Shue Shue, who were both in the early stage of foundation establishment, fly over, she was pleasantly surprised. This gongzhi is too powerful, it should be close to the middle stage of foundation establishment. The three of us together should be able to scare it away. After we escape this calamity, I will thank you two fellow cultivators. No problem. Hearing this, Shue Shue pursed her lips and glanced at Xiaohua. With a wave of her hand, a dozen or so fireball talismans were taken out with a rumble. They really were like heavenly maidens scattering flowers on the black and white sea. Xiaohua curled his lips. Wasn't this the fireball talisman he gave Shue Shue earlier? Now she actually took it out and used it. Xiaohua's fireball talisman was so powerful. Dozens of fireballs fell on the sea beast's pitch-black back and exploded at the same time. The explosion caused the gongzhi to shake violently, and the surrounding sea water was raised high. It was obviously in great pain. With a loud and clear sound, a water sword suddenly shot out in front of the gongzhi's head. As soon as the water sword came out, the Kueha Sea immediately condensed into ice and pierced toward Shue Shue. The ice sword was so fast and so powerful that it contained a sufficient amount of spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Xiaohua was slightly startled. He was just about to wave the soaring dragon shears, but at this moment he saw Shue Shue calmly urging the true essence in her body. The butterfly-like magic weapon suddenly flashed, and one of the butterfly-like magic weapon expanded, blocking the ice sword. The ice sword pierced the butterfly, twisting it. But in just a moment, the butterfly trembled slightly and returned to normal. The ice sword, however, lost its strength and fell into the Kueha Sea. Seeing this, Xiaohua felt relieved. "Fellow Taoist, why didn't you come to help?" The female cultivator whose face was somewhat pale and seemed to lack blood was the female cultivator Xiaohua met at the auction in Haoming City. She asked very strangely. Xiaohua originally wanted to touch his nose out of habit, but he suddenly remembered that this female cultivator might have seen his actions. He immediately stopped and said with a smile, "My wife will do it. I will hold the fort for you." The female cultivator looked at Shue Shue and glared at Xiaohua. She raised her voice and said, "Fellow Taoist, lure Jianghu to the side. I know Jianghu's weakness. If you and I work together, we will be able to drive this monster away." "Okay." Hearing this, Shue Shue waved her hand and threw out more than 10 fireball talismans, while she flew horizontally. Jianghu was in pain. He swept his weak and tyrannical divine sense and chased after Shue Shue. At the same time, the ink balls in his tentacles shot toward Xue Xue. Fellow Taoist, be careful. The female cultivator reminded, Zhenji's ink balls are highly toxic. If the skin touches even a little bit, it will immediately disintegrate. If it touches the face. Hearing this, Xue Xue was shocked and hurriedly threw several fireball talismans in front of her. Unfortunately, Xue Xue's technique was not as good as Xiaohua's. A few ink balls still dodged the fireball talismans and flew close to Xue Xue. When the ink balls exploded, the ink fog rushed toward Xue Xue. Xue Xue hurriedly flew up, and the butterflies around her rotated again. However, she flew a little too late. Moreover, the ink fog could actually seep into the butterfly orchids. Xiaohua was already prepared. Seeing that Xue Xue had some mishap, he immediately swung his big sleeve and used the Heaven and Earth sleeve spell. A gust of wind was generated from his Taoist robe and instantly blew away the ink fog. Ah? The female cultivator was shocked at first, but then her face revealed an ecstatic expression. Heaven and Earth sleeve spell. Fellow Taoist is actually in the middle stage of foundation establishment? Xiaohua turned to look at the female cultivator. At first, he was somewhat puzzled as to why this female cultivator, who was only in the early stage of foundation establishment, knew about the Heaven and Earth sleeve spell. However, he immediately understood. This female cultivator, if she isn't a disciple of Blood Red Island, then she must be a disciple near Blood Red Island. However, Xiaohua understood that the sea region he was in was far from Blood Red Island. He was somewhat puzzled as to why a disciple of Blood Red Island would come here alone. Just as the female cultivator was in a daze, several ink balls also flew to her feet and exploded extremely quickly. The female cultivator did not have any protective magic tools. Seeing that she was about to be tainted by the ink fog, Xiaohua was helpless. He could only wave his sleeve again and use the Heaven and Earth sleeve spell to disperse the ink fog. You're tuning into the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.